Chapter 1. Someone jumped off the building. Who? Who jumped off the building? Li Daochong. A girl screamed in front of Xiansong University's Building 7. The students downstairs all looked up. On the edge of the roof, a young man in a blue windbreaker held a bottle of wine in his hand and drank it all in one breath. His feet were half hanging on the edge of the roof, and his body was on the verge of collapse. He could fall down at any time. Exclamations came from downstairs. So it's him. I heard that this kid has been having a hard time recently. Because of his father, he was ostracized in class and his teacher advised him to quit. A few days ago, the Federation's Cultivator Security Bureau came to investigate him. It would be strange if they didn't investigate him. His father, Li Tianyang, was stationed in the Frontier Star Field and fled. Who would have thought that the once all-powerful hero would be a coward? No matter how good his image is, when it comes to real action, his true colors will be revealed and he will collapse. That's not all. I heard that this kid, as a member of the Li family, was beaten up by his own family members and driven out of the house to sleep on the street. His adopted sister, Li Qinyao, said that he had molested her in the past. That can't be. This kid's brain isn't very bright. He's a bit of a coward, but he doesn't feel that wretched or evil. You can't judge a book by its cover. You're not a roundworm in his stomach. How do you know what kind of person he is? That's true. At first, I sympathized with this kid, but now it seems that he deserves it. I also heard that the marriage he was engaged to when he was young is going to be ruined because of Li Tianyang's defection. Tianyuan City's #1 beauty, Qiao Shima, is this kid's fiancé. Before, when Li Tianyang was at his peak, it was fine. Now that Li Tianyang defected from the front lines and is wanted by the Federation, the Li family has already submitted a letter to the Federation to remove Li Tianyang from his position as the head of the family and remove him from the family tree. The Li family no longer has this person. Although the Qiao family is only a small family, they can't marry their only daughter to a traitor. Indigo Bay Star, Tianyuan City, Profound Blue University. On the roof of the No. 7 teaching building of the Profound Blue University, Li Daochong felt a burst of dizziness and then sobered up. He immediately heard the undisguised noise downstairs, and what they were saying overlapped with the picture in his memory. Li Daochong, who was standing on the 7th floor of the building, looked at the crowd below with a blank expression. The unfamiliar environment made him a little nervous. Why were there so many strange things flying around in the sky? Shouldn't he be sitting in front of the computer programming? Li Daochong clearly remembered that he was working on an old PC online game called Blood Glory, and was improving it into a mobile version. Because of the urging of the investors, he worked on it for 3 days and 3 nights, and then Li Daochong's body suddenly shook. He remembered that he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart and fell head first on the computer keyboard. After that, he lost consciousness. Later, he seemed to have had a very, very long dream. He dreamed that he was born in a very powerful family in another world. His father was also called Li Tianyang, but his identity was very different. He was a lieutenant general in the Federation's government army, and the Li family was one of the 4 major families in Blue Bay Star. He was a veritable second generation of a rich official. He was the moon surrounded by stars, and he lived a rich life. However, this also caused him to lose his ambition. In addition, his brain was not very bright, and he only knew how to eat, drink, and play all day long without learning or skills. Until 3 months ago, when his father, Li Tianyang, who guarded the Federation's northern frontier star region's Sirius star, was exposed and fled during the battle with the Ghost Army of the Hades. His good days came to an end. Parallel universe? Another me? As an otaku who loved web novels, fantasy, games, programming, and screen licking, Li Daochong reacted quickly and quickly realized that he had most likely transmigrated. The strange thing was, he seemed to have lived here for a very long time. Just now, when his main consciousness collapsed and his other self suddenly died, only then did his original self completely wake up. Young master, a bad life is better than a good death. Think about it, if you really jump down, you will lose everything. There is always hope as long as you are alive. Do you really believe that your master will run away? Just when Li Daochong was quickly sorting out his thoughts, he heard a very anxious and young girl's crying voice behind him. He turned around and saw Kanu Yinping looking at him with tears in her eyes. Her petite body was trembling in fear, afraid that Li Daochong would really jump down. Kanu, a native of planet Kata. When they were discovered, planet Kata was still in the slave society stage. The natural conditions were terrible, and the population was small. In the end, planet Kata became a colonial planet, and the Kata people were sold to various parts of the Federation's star field. Because the Kata people were not civilized, as long as they did not have to worry about food and clothing, becoming a slave was a very good way out for them. However, the price of a Kanu was extremely high, especially a young one. Buying one would cost at least 50,000 Federation coins. 300 Federation coins was enough for a normal family to live comfortably for a month. Having a Kanu was also a symbol of status and wealth. Kanu Yinping was bought by his father, Li Tianyang, when Li Daochong was 9 years old. She was his personal maid and took care of his daily life. At that time, Yinping was only 6 years old. Li Daochong remembered that after he was chased out of the Li family, only Yinping stayed by his side. The others could not wait for him to die and reincarnate as soon as possible. It would be best if he had nothing to do with the Li family. Li Tianyang's desertion brought shame to the family. His other self had lived like a princess for 18 years. Other than being lazy, he wasn't a bad person, but he wasn't very smart. Not only was his body weak and sickly, but he also frequently spoke nonsense, such as, "Where am I? Isn't this Earth? Shit, I have to hand in the programming code tomorrow. Oh my god, how can a car fly in the sky?" Only Li Daochong knew that these were the words that he subconsciously said when he occasionally woke up. After his father fell from power, he was completely reduced to a dog in the water. Even his own family kicked him when he was down and abandoned him. The situation in his life was really miserable. It was understandable that he did not have anything to live for. His predecessor finally could not take it anymore and had a mental breakdown. He drank too much and died from alcohol poisoning, leaving behind a mess for him to clean up. At this time, Li Daochong, who was completely awake, had a bitter smile on his face. He turned his head and looked at the pairs of cold eyes downstairs. He then turned his head to look at Yinping and said, "Yes, there is always hope as long as I am alive." "That's great, young master. You've thought it through. Don't stand there, let's go downstairs." Yinping smiled through her tears. "Okay." Seeking death was the act of a coward. Li Daochong was not that stupid. He responded and turned around to leave the edge of the roof. Downstairs, a small number of cowards secretly sighed in relief. Most people's eyes were extremely cold. Not many people cared about the life and death of a traitor's stupid son. However, most people did not want to see a fresh life fall to the ground. In the crowd, Zhang Honglia's face stiffened. "Damn it, why hasn't this kid jumped down yet? Was the amount of hallucinogens in the bottle of wine he drank not enough?" Zhang Honglia's lackey, Zhao Peng, followed and said, "Young Master Zhang, if this kid doesn't die, the Qiao family will not be able to cancel the engagement. The Li family has released the news that the one to be removed from the family tree is Li Tianyang, not Li Daochong. They want to let him live on his own, and he is still a member of the Li family. We can cancel the engagement, but the betrothal gifts that Li Tianyang gave to the Qiao family must all be returned. In addition, the mine that was given to the Qiao family must also be returned to the Li family. Otherwise, the engagement between Qiao Shima and Li Daochong cannot be cancelled." If the Chiao family dares to unilaterally cancel the engagement, the Li family will go to the Supreme Cultivator Court of the Federation to sue the Chiao family for marriage fraud. Back then, the betrothal gifts that Li Tianyang gave to the Li family were not small. If the Chiao family did not rely on this, I'm afraid that the Chiao family would have already gone bankrupt. However, even with the little wealth that the Chiao family has now, it is still not enough to repay the betrothal gift. Zhang Honglia's eyes narrowed. Then let Li Daochong die. Xiao Shima will definitely be mine. No one can take her away. It seems that the blow to this kid was not hard enough. Zhao Peng, do you have a way to make this kid commit suicide? Zhao Peng smiled sinisterly. Young Master Zhan, the only thing that Li Daochong can rely on is that card slave girl. Starting with the card slave, Li Daochong's spirit has long been on the verge of collapse. He definitely won't be able to take the blow. Young Master Zhan's eyes flashed ruthlessly. It's just a slave. Even if you kill her, you will only have to pay some money. I'll leave this matter to you. If you do it well, I guarantee that you will be promoted from the ordinary class to the elite class. Zhao Peng was excited. Young Master Zhan, thank you. Zhao Peng then walked away and whispered a few words to a burly guy not far away. He handed over a small black card talisman. Plant this skeleton dwarf into the card slave's body. The guy nodded repeatedly and led the two into the 7th teaching building. Li Daochong and Yin Ping had just gone down to the 3rd floor when they were blocked by 3 people. The leader was Xian Song University's Cultivation Department's ordinary class freshman, Gang Chui. Although this person didn't enter the elite class, he was born with godly strength. He refined his body but not his qi, and his strength was even greater than some of the people in the elite class. He had a violent personality, and many students had suffered at his hands. There was a student in the ordinary class who wasn't convinced and was directly beaten by Gang Chui in the end-of-term competition. He was almost crippled. After that, the student dropped out of school and never recovered. Li Daochong knew that things weren't good, but he acted as if nothing had happened. He pulled Yin Ping to go around the few people. Li Daochong, don't you know that this school's rules state that card slaves and dogs are not allowed to enter? Gang Chui said in a rough voice. Li Daochong's footsteps paused. Yin Ping's little face stiffened. She pulled Li Daochong and whispered, Young master, don't care what he says. Let's go. Li Daochong sighed slightly. Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the strength to do so. Not to mention 3 people, any one of them could easily kill him. His body was too weak. He would fall if the wind blew. Li Daochong suppressed his anger. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. He silently followed Yin Ping and continued to walk forward. Bang! Suddenly, a large foot kicked out and ruthlessly kicked Yin Ping's thin back. Yin Ping groaned and fell to the ground. Blood spilled out of her mouth. Her petite body couldn't withstand such a heavy blow. She almost fainted. Bastard, wait for someone. Gang Chui cursed after kicking Yin Ping. With a flick of his hand, an imperceptible black shadow shot into Yin Ping's body and disappeared. Li Daochong was completely enraged. He turned around and was about to make a move when his leg tightened. Young master, don't. Yin Ping knelt on the ground and hugged Li Daochong's legs. This Li Daochong was not the Li Daochong he used to be. He was a programmer who forgot everything and risked his life when he was ruthless. His tenacity and unyielding character were extremely terrifying. When Li Daochong was interviewed as a programmer, the interviewer asked him a question. Were you able to work under pressure and be ruthless? Li Daochong replied, I usually don't get ruthless. When I get ruthless, even I am afraid of myself. Yin Ping desperately tried to stop him, but Li Daochong still raised his fist. Seeing Li Daochong raise his fist, Gang Chui revealed a sinister smile. Private fights were prohibited in the school. The first to make a move would be recorded with a serious demerit or even expelled from the school. Gang Chui raised his fist and waited for Li Daochong to hit him first. Then it would be logical and justifiable. This idiot's fist strength was only 78 pounds last time, which was even worse than an ordinary girl. This little fist strength was not even enough to tickle Gang Chue. But bang bang bang. Li Daochong punched himself in the face 3 times in a row. Each punch was more ruthless than the previous one. Every punch hit the bridge of his nose. Kacha, the sound of bones cracking could be faintly heard. Was this kid crazy? Gang Chue stood still with his fist raised. He looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. Yin Ping was also stunned. Could it be that the young master couldn't stand the stimulation and had schizophrenia? After a few seconds of silence, suddenly, Li Daochong covered his nose and looked at the corner of the stairs and yelled, "Ouch, the teacher hit me!" Gang Chue was stunned on the spot. He turned his head and saw that Blizzard Bing had appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked at his raised fist with a frosty face. Blizzard Bing's real name was Qin Yubing. She was a first-class lecturer at Xiansong University. She was the youngest first-class lecturer in the history of the university and also the most ruthless lecturer in the history of the university. People called her Blizzard Bing. You again. Blizzard Bing frowned and looked at Gang Chue coldly. Private fights are prohibited in the school? Do you think the school rules are for decoration? You come to my office. This student goes to the infirmary. Everyone else is dismissed. Li Daochong did not say anything. He took Yin Ping and quickly left. Chapter 2. Young Master, how did you know a teacher was here? Silver Bottle asked curiously after leaving the building. When we came down from the roof and passed by the 5th floor, we happened to see Blizzard Ice coming out of her office. I don't know if she came downstairs or not, Li Daochong replied. Ah, what if she didn't come down? Silver Bottle asked with some lingering fear. It's okay if she didn't come down. The school forbids private fights. As long as I didn't hit the hammer, he wouldn't dare to hit me first. It's not against the rules to hit myself, Li Daochong said casually. Silver Bottle looked at her master, Li Daochong, with a strange look. His nose was swollen. Li Daochong pulled Silver Bottle out of the school gate and took the floating bus to the old district in the west of Tianyuan City. It was dark and damp, and the houses were dilapidated. Some had even collapsed. Broken tiles and broken walls were covered in spider webs. It was a bleak scene, and it was a stark contrast to the bustling main district. This was the abandoned city of wastelands. Li Daochong was ostracized in school, so he couldn't stay in the dormitory. Plus, he didn't feel safe leaving Silver Bottle alone. He could only rent a bungalow in the slums of the West District. It was a little shabby, but it was cheap. It only cost 10 Federation coins a month. As soon as they entered the house, Silver Bottle suddenly began to vomit. Li Daochong hurriedly poured a cup of hot water for Silver Bottle. The moment she took the cup, Silver Bottle's eyes flashed black. She reached out her small hand and grabbed Li Daochong's neck. Silver Bottle, you! Li Daochong screamed in horror. However, the force on his neck stopped him abruptly. Li Daochong had difficulty breathing. Silver Bottle's pretty face was extremely ferocious, and saliva kept flowing out of her mouth. Kiki! Silver Bottle's throat made a terrifying sound as if it came from hell. Li Daochong tried to resist, but for some reason, Silver Bottle's strength was abnormally strong. He was no match for her at all. Li Daochong felt like his neck was about to be crushed. As he was on the verge of death, Li Daochong realized that Silver Bottle had been possessed by the skeleton dwarf. She was currently in a typical state of being possessed by a skeleton dwarf. Am I going to die as soon as I wake up? Li Daochong was unwilling to give up. He desperately tried to recall what he had learned in the ordinary cultivation class in the first half of his freshman year, but nothing came to mind. His predecessor hadn't learned anything. Just as Li Daochong was about to lose consciousness, he suddenly remembered the soul lure technique that Li Tianyang had taught him a long time ago. The soul lure spell couldn't even be considered a spell. At most, it could be considered a small trick used to lure those unconscious underworld ghosts out and kill them. Skeleton dwarfs were the lowest level of dark ghosts. They had no consciousness other than their instinct to eat. Li Daochong desperately circulated the pitiful amount of spiritual energy in his body and silently recited the soul seduction spell. In such a desperate situation, he had actually succeeded. A wisp of spiritual energy condensed into an illusion of a ghost above Li Daochong's head. In the eyes of the skeleton dwarf, the soul of a person who had just died was the most delicious. Silver Bottle's eyes flashed with black light, and then a black shadow of nothingness flew out of her body. Silver Bottle's body softened and fell down. The black shadow of nothingness hungrily pounced on the ghost that appeared above Li Daochong's head and instantly entered his body. Seeing the skeleton dwarf fly out of Silver Bottle's body, Li Daochong secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and then concentrated on dealing with the skeleton dwarf that had invaded his body. Li Daochong didn't know if he could defeat the skeleton dwarf on a spiritual level, but this was the only way. No matter what, he had to try. Otherwise, both he and Silver Bottle would die. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well fight. Maybe he could still survive. After waiting for a while, Li Daochong didn't feel anything unusual. His consciousness was clear and his body was still under his control. His head didn't hurt and he didn't feel dizzy. What's going on? A crisp sound came from his consciousness. In his sea of consciousness, a black shadow scurried up and down like a migrating bird in an earthquake. It was then absorbed by a flashing electric light and disappeared. Li Daochong's mind was alert. Was it going to start? Soul power obtained. The hot-blooded upgrader has recognized its owner. Li Daochong, male, initial level 0, killing a skeleton dwarf can increase by 1 level. Do you want to learn basic ability? Li Daochong was instantly petrified, his expression frozen on the spot. A few minutes later, Li Daochong came back to his senses, his expression still in disbelief. Li Daochong pinched his arm hard. It hurts. It's not a dream. Isn't the hot-blooded upgrader the upgrade program that I programmed myself in the mobile version of Hot-Blooded Glory after working on it for 3 days and 3 nights before my sudden death? Li Daochong clicked yes in a daze, and the hollow sound came again. Learning basic cultivation method completed. In an instant, Li Daochong was sweating profusely. His legs gave out as if he had just finished a marathon, and he fell to the ground. Huff, huff. Li Daochong panted heavily and sat on the ground, unable to even lift his arm. Just now, countless simple repetitive movements in his sea of consciousness were superimposed and merged together. Li Daochong felt that he had gone through months of special training. The flow of time had increased exponentially, and the boring and long special training was completed in the blink of an eye. So tired. Li Daochong collapsed, and his body fell to the ground, unconscious. Young master, what's wrong with you? Wake up, don't scare me. You can't die. What am I going to do if you die? Silver Bottle shook Li Daochong's body helplessly. Li Daochong slowly opened his eyes and saw Silver Bottle's tear-stained face. He forced a smile. Stop shaking, my bones are about to fall apart. Seeing Li Daochong wake up, Silver Bottle's little face relaxed, and she quickly stopped. Young master, what happened just now? Why don't I remember that we are already home? Li Daochong struggled to sit up and touched his belly. We both fainted from hunger. Silver Bottle stared with a pair of almond eyes. Really? Li Daochong scratched Silver Bottle's little nose. Don't ask, go and cook. I'm starving. Okay, I'll go and cook. Silver Bottle wiped her tears and got up to go to the kitchen. Li Daochong lowered his head to check his body. He didn't find anything wrong, but he was very hungry, and his stomach kept growling. Was it just an illusion? Li Daochong thought to himself. Hot-blooded leveler? Li Daochong just had this thought, and a dialogue box immediately appeared in front of him. The interface was simple and clear. Profession: hot-blooded cultivator. Character: Li Daochong. Level: 1 Talisman, none. Skills: basic cultivation method. Other than that, there was nothing else. There was only a caption at the bottom, but the font was dim, as if it hadn't been activated. The text was: Equipment and material exchange, 1,000 soul points can be exchanged for one item. Current soul points, 0, unable to exchange. The material bar cannot be opened. Li Daochong repeatedly opened and closed the hot-blooded leveler several times to confirm that it wasn't an illusion. In a trance, he felt a surge of hot blood in his heart. The world was unpredictable, and life was unpredictable. A few hours ago, Li Daochong was still hesitating and worrying about how to survive in the future. Today, he was overshadowed, and tomorrow, he might have to pay it back double. On the way back, Li Daochong was still thinking about whether to take Silver Bottle and leave Tianyuan City to lie low for a while. With the leveler, there was finally hope for this frail body. It was really a case of endless mountains and rivers, a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Although Li Daochong's main body had just awakened, he had experienced everything together with his predecessor. After his father's accident, he couldn't control his own fate, and was at the mercy of others. Silver Bottle was beaten and scolded many times, but he didn't even dare to fart. The pain of not being able to protect the people around him was like a sharp sword piercing through him. And Li Daochong didn't believe that his father, Li Tianyang, had deserted the rebel army. How could a Jin Dan cultivator, who had single-handedly entered the edge of the Hades and killed a soul catcher and rescued 3 refiners, be afraid of death? But Li Daochong was powerless to investigate. Because he was too weak, no one took him seriously. They even thought that it was his foolish son's existence that made the insufferably arrogant Li Tianyang become pedantic. He was a jinx. Li Daochong knew that there was only one reason, and that was that he didn't have the strength. In his previous life, Li Daochong worked hard, coding day and night. Other than earning more money, he also dreamed of creating the world's strongest mobile game. Since the Wheel of Fate had brought him here, he could only give up on his dream of creating the world's strongest mobile game. But dreams weren't unchangeable. Li Daochong clenched his fists. Then let me level up to become the strongest cultivator. On the wall beside Li Daochong's computer desk, there was a sentence written with a marker to motivate himself. People have to have some goals and dreams in life, or else they're just a walking feces machine. At night, Silver Bottle cooked a table full of dishes. She used all the ingredients she had at home, and the only 2 kilograms of sea beast meat was braised together with sweet potatoes. During dinner, Li Daochong's appetite left Silver Bottle dumbfounded. She only ate a small bowl of the pot of rice, but the young master ate the rest clean. There wasn't even a crumb left in the 5 dishes. What made Silver Bottle even more speechless was that after Li Daochong finished eating, he rubbed his stomach and said, as if he hadn't had enough, "I'm barely 60% full." A colorless liquid flowed down Silver Bottle's little nose. She looked at Li Daochong in shock. "Young master, this is our food for 5 days. We don't even have rice left at home." "Ah, this is 5 days' worth of food?" Li Daochong was shocked. He looked at the plate on the table and realized that his appetite was a little strange. Li Daochong touched his pocket and took out all the loose change. There was a total of 53 Federation coins. "Silver Bottle, take these to buy food." "Young master, there's no need. There's still some money left from the last time." "Silly girl, the last time I gave you money was a month ago. I know you're using the savings you've saved over the years. It's been hard on you these days. I'll definitely find a way to change your environment." Silver Bottle blushed and said softly, "Young master, Silver Bottle is your personal property. It's my duty to serve you. It's not hard at all. Silver Bottle is lucky to have met a master like young master. Most buyers don't treat card slaves as humans. Silver Bottle is content with her life now. I only hope that young master can be safe and sound." Li Daocheng's heart warmed. He remembered how Silver Bottle never left him in the past. He liked this girl even more. Silver Bottle, you're not a property. You're a person. You're free. Li Daocheng said emotionally. Thud. Silver Bottle knelt down in front of Li Daocheng. Her face was full of panic. Young master, don't chase me away. Did Silver Bottle do something wrong to make you unhappy? Silver Bottle will definitely change. Please don't chase me away. The people of Kata only recognize one master in their life. Li Daocheng looked at Silver Bottle in shock. He quickly explained, Silver Bottle, I'm not chasing you away. I just want to tell you that people can't become property. Silver Bottle's big eyes blinked as she looked at Li Daocheng. Why can't I become property? Li Daocheng was speechless. What an evil slave society. That night, the master and servant had a deep discussion on this issue. In the end, Li Daocheng gave up. Silver Bottle successfully changed the fact that she was property and fell asleep peacefully. The next day was the weekend. Naturally, there was no need to go to school. Li Daocheng recuperated. His nose had basically recovered after leveling up yesterday. He still looked thin, but Li Daocheng really felt that his body was different from before. During the day, Li Daocheng found a yard overgrown with weeds in the slums to practice basic cultivation method. When it was time to eat, he would go back and eat. The amount of food prepared by Yin Ping was very sufficient, and the quality was also very good. She specially bought a black honey chicken that weighed 5 catties and boiled the soup. Li Daocheng ate it all in one meal. The past few months had been tough, but at least they didn't have to worry about food. However, now that the young master's appetite had increased, Silver Bottle realized that they wouldn't be able to eat for a few days. She couldn't help but worry. She thought about going to Auntie Li in the East Alley to find work and earn money to buy food. Li Daocheng's body was extremely hungry after he received the hot-blooded upgrader. He ate dozens of Federation coins in a day. He knew that with his current financial situation, he couldn't support it. Soon, they wouldn't be able to eat. At night, the master and servant each had their own thoughts. One of them slept in the outer room and the other in the inner room. Late at night, Li Daocheng slept while Silver Bottle slept. He put on his jacket, stepped into the night, and drove his old floating pickup truck to Bluestone Ridge, which was 100 kilometers west of the slums. Li Daocheng thought about it. The fastest way to solve the food problem was to hunt. There was a bad-tempered herbivore in Bluestone Ridge called the stone-horn cow. Chapter 3. Bluestone Ridge. The cold wind was blowing. Under the cover of the night, one couldn't even see their own fingers. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed. He could actually see the dark seen 30 to 40 feet away. He already had a basic level of clear spirit eye. This was one of the signs of the first level of Qi training. Li Daocheng hid behind a large bluestone. Not far away, a herd of stone-horned cows gathered together, sleeping. Although the stone-horned cow was a herbivore, it had a violent temperament and was extremely aggressive. Every year, hundreds of civilians would die under the stone-horned cow's horns. Li Daocheng held his breath, tightly gripping the rusty scythe in his hand. This was the only weapon he could find in the slums. It was probably used by a family for weeding. The penniless Li Daocheng could only make do with it. Li Daocheng's target was a stone-horned cow. Now that a herd of stone-horned cows had gathered together, it would be tragic if they were to all wake up because of the commotion. A first-level Qi training cultivator would be lucky if he could defeat one stone-horned cow. A third-level Qi training cultivator might not be able to deal with a herd of stone-horned cows. Li Daocheng picked up a small stone under his feet and threw it at a smaller stone-horned cow closest to him. The stone bounced off the thick hide, but the stone-horned cow didn't feel it at all. It wasn't even close to touching it. Just as Li Daocheng was thinking about how to lure a stone-horned cow out, suddenly, roar! A deep roar came from the side. Li Daocheng was shocked, his body tensed up, and he curled up into a crack under the bluestone. This was the unique roar of a hyena. The sleeping herd of stone horn cows was instantly awakened, letting out a series of frightened cries and panic. Hyenas were the natural enemies of stone horn cows, the kings of Blue Bay Star's wildlife. Only someone at the 4th level of Chi training could possibly deal with them. A first-level Chi training cultivator was like a piece of cake in front of a hyena. With the appearance of the hyenas, strong winds blew. A dark silhouette leaped out from under the rock on the right of Li Daochong. It was a 10-feet-long Lai master, who darted out from less than 50 feet away from Li Daochong's hiding spot. Li Daochong broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't realize that the hyena was so close to him. If the hyena's target was him, he would have become its meal. The stone horn bulls fled in all directions, but the hyena was as fast as lightning. It locked onto its target and pounced on it, biting its neck. The stone-horned cow screamed and fell to the ground, unable to withstand a single blow. Soon, it stopped breathing. The hyena laid on the stone-horned cow's body, ignoring everything else and focusing on enjoying its prey. Li Daochong no longer had any thoughts of hunting the stone-horn cows. He only wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. The hyena was not something he could handle. Li Daochong crawled out from the crevice. Using the large rock as cover, he slowly retreated. After making sure that the hyena wasn't paying attention to him, he turned around and ran. After leveling up, Li Daochong's running speed had increased by quite a bit. Even with his sickly body, he still needed 17 seconds to run a 100-meter dash. Even a little girl couldn't outrun him. Now, he could run as fast as flying. Li Daochong's old intelligent spirit watch showed that he ran a 100-meter dash in just 10 seconds. The increase in speed was far beyond Li Daochong's expectations. Li Daochong was secretly delighted. Suddenly, a cow's cry sounded. It was right next to his ear. Li Daochong's eyes twitched. He reacted quickly and jumped to the right. A gust of wind blew behind him, and a large stone-horned cow brushed past him. Boom! The stone-horned cow that was sneaking up on them crashed into a huge green rock that was over 10 feet tall, causing it to topple over. Li Daochong's palms were sweating profusely. What kind of monstrous strength was this? This stone-horned cow was obviously bigger than the other stone-horned cows. It was almost as big as a hyena. Its back was bulging, and the pair of horns on its head were large and wide, with sharp tips. This stone-horned cow looked restless and angry. It didn't stop after slamming into the rock. It turned around and sped up, charging towards Li Daochong even more violently. The stone-horned cow weighed over 500 kilograms, but its large size didn't affect its speed at all. With a speed of 60 kilometers per hour, it was like a speeding train in front of a normal person. Pay! Li Daochong spat on the ground. He held his scythe with both hands and jumped 4 meters into the air. The stone-horned cow missed. Moo! It impatiently cried out. Li Daochong fell from the air. Using the momentum of the fall, he stabbed the scythe into the stone-horned cow's back. Clang! The 1.5-foot-long scythe was completely embedded into the cow's back. The pain made the stone-horned cow go crazy. It cried out and shook its body crazily. Pung! Li Daochong was thrown off by the force and landed heavily on a huge rock. Li Daochong felt like his bones were about to fall apart. Before he could stand up, the stone-horned cow had already charged towards him. The handle of the scythe was stuck on the back of the stone-horned cow. Li Daochong hurriedly stood up. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, he subconsciously reached out his hands and grabbed the cow's horns. Even a level 1 Chi training realm cultivator wouldn't be able to suppress the stone-horned cow in terms of strength. Li Daochong's actions were completely out of instinct. He couldn't dodge anymore. Pop! The moment his hands touched the cow's horns, Li Daochong gathered all the strength in his body. Li Daochong made a sound of surprise. How could the stone-horned cow's strength be so weak? He actually managed to stop the stone-horned cow's charge, and he was only pushed back 5 or 6 steps. After a while of stalemate, Li Daochong clenched his teeth and exerted all his strength. The stone horn cow was pushed to the ground by him, breathing heavily from its nose. Li Daochong then realized that the stone horn cow's back was bleeding profusely from the place where the scythe had pierced through. The scythe seemed to have hit a vital point. No wonder the stone horn cow's strength had decreased so much that it didn't get up again after being pushed down. Vaguely, there seemed to be a green mist coming out of the stone horn cow's body and entering Li Daochong's body. At this time, Li Daochong was also exhausted. He didn't dare to stay here for too long. There was still a hyena a few hundred meters away. Li Daochong drove the old floating pickup truck over. Using the principle of leverage, he pushed the stone horn cow to the back of the truck and brought the prey back to the city. With only a rusty scythe, Li Daochong, who had just stepped into the level 1 Qi training realm, was able to kill an adult stone horn cow without any injuries. It was already quite impressive. After returning home, Li Daochong parked the car in the courtyard and went to sleep as soon as he entered the house. The next day, Yinping looked at the huge creature in the back of the truck and opened her mouth for a long time. Li Daochong didn't explain anything to her. He only told her to quickly prepare the base ingredients and condiments for the hot pot at noon. Yinping was very obedient. She wouldn't ask too much about the young master's matters. Unless the young master said it himself, she wouldn't ask. Li Daochong spent a tremendous amount of effort to remove one of the cow's legs. The only 2 kitchen knives and the scythe in the house were all broken. The stone horn cow's bones were unimaginably hard. Without a suitable bone cleaver, the stone horn cow would have rotted before it even reached its mouth. Li Daochong didn't hesitate. He carried the cow's leg and went to Butcher Lu's shop in the east alley next door to exchange for a brand new bone cleaver. In the slums, stone horn cow was a top-quality product. Butcher Lu saw that the cow's leg was fresh and the meat was plump. It was obvious that it was a wild breed. He didn't say anything and gave Li Daochong a steel bone cleaver. After returning home, Li Daochong bared his upper body and didn't stop for a moment. He dismembered the stone horn cow and scraped its meat. At noon, the master and servant had a big meal. Li Daochong ate until his stomach was round. In the afternoon, Yinping took a portion of the innards and meat to the market to sell. This kind of top-quality meat wasn't common in the slums. Coupled with the fact that it was cheap, it was quickly sold out. Silver Bottle happily earned more than 300 federal coins, and yesterday's gloomy expression disappeared. After lunch, Li Daochong opened the blood upgrader. To his surprise, he found that the amount of soul power remaining in the exchange column wasn't 0, but 10. Li Daochong immediately thought of the faint green mist that appeared when he killed the stone horn cow. If I'm not wrong, killing dark ghosts will increase my soul power, and killing wild beasts will increase my soul power? Li Daochong muttered to himself. That was his initial guess. Whether or not his guess was correct required further verification. As a programmer, Li Daochong had a strict and meticulous way of doing things. How did he use the blood upgrader? How did he level it up? What were the requirements? What kind of increase in strength would he get with each level? Li Daochong wanted to know the answers to all these questions as soon as possible. The blood upgrader showed that he was currently level 1. Li Daochong felt that the amount of spiritual energy in his body had clearly increased. The previous bit of spiritual energy was all due to the pills that his father, Li Tianyang, had fed him without caring about the cost. Unfortunately, the effects were minimal. Li Daochong's 9 basic spirit veins couldn't be opened no matter what method he used. This kind of talent was equivalent to a cripple. Not to mention cultivation, he couldn't even compare to an ordinary person. There were 9 basic spirit veins in a person's body. Those with outstanding talent would have 5 elemental spirit veins. Above the 5 elemental spirit veins were the profound heaven spirit veins. Those with profound heaven spirit veins were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Each one of them was a proud son of heaven. In order to cultivate, one must first open the 9 basic spirit veins. Every time the qi condensation stage increased by a level, one of the basic spirit veins would open. At the 9th level of qi condensation, all 9 meridians would be opened. At the 10th level of qi condensation, all 9 meridians would become one. Once the spirit root was established, one would reach foundation establishment. There was a saying on the spiritual net: if you haven't built your spirit foundation, don't call yourself a cultivator. After Li Daochong practiced the basic cultivation technique, he was disappointed. There was nothing amazing about it. They were all simple repetitive movements. The only difference was that this technique didn't have any restrictions. It could be used barehanded or with swords, spears, and staffs. It was too heterogeneous and fell behind. It was the opposite of the school's emphasis on specialization. What was even more strange was that Li Daochong was clearly at the first level of qi condensation, but the basic spirit veins in his body hadn't been opened. The increase in spirit energy was completely from the soul power absorbed by the hot-blooded upgrader. There were still some questions about the hot-blooded upgrader that had yet to be solved. What Li Daochong could do now was to consolidate the basic cultivation technique and stabilize the spirit energy in his body. The weekend passed quickly. In the morning, Li Daochong drank 5 bowls of stone horn beef soup and 5 big steamed buns. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he stepped on the road to school. Li Daochong ran all the way from the West City slums to the entrance of Xian University. It was a distance of nearly 30 kilometers. He ran for more than an hour without stopping. In Li Daochong's eyes, the hot-blooded upgrader was just a springboard. As for how high he could jump, he would have to rely on himself. Continuous cultivation was the way of the king. When Li Daochong saw the grand entrance of Xian University, a trace of a smile appeared on his face. After running at a constant speed for 30 kilometers, Li Daochong was slightly panting. He didn't feel tired at all. This was absolutely impossible in the past. Just as Li Daochong stopped and walked towards the entrance, a star-grade floating vehicle came to a stop beside Li Daochong. The door opened and a tall and beautiful girl walked out. She immediately attracted the attention of many students both inside and outside the school. The girls were envious while the boys were staring blankly. Xian University's #1 beauty, and also Tianyuan City's #1 beauty, Qiao Shima. Chapter 4. After Qiao Shima got out of the car, she walked to Li Daochong, pursed her red lips, and asked apologetically, "Li Daochong, have you thought about what I told you last time?" "Shima?" Li Daochong was stunned and called out subconsciously. Soon, the scene from half a month ago appeared in his memory. Li Daochong's predecessor was deeply attracted to this woman and could not extricate himself from her. He would give her whatever she asked for and would blush and stammer when he looked at her. However, the current Li Daochong did not have much feelings for this #1 beauty. He had even forgotten that such a person existed. He was only thinking about how to level up and improve his strength as soon as possible. Now that he saw her, he suddenly remembered that he had such a fiancée. Without any preparation, Li Daochong replied perfunctorily, "I've thought about it. Did you agree?" Qiao Shima was slightly happy. That, I have a class in the morning and am in a hurry. Let's talk about it at noon, Li Daochong quickly said and was about to leave. In fact, Li Daochong did not have time to think about that matter after he woke up. How could he have thought it through? He could only find an excuse to leave first. Then let's have lunch together at noon at the same hotel. Qiao Shima reached out and pulled Li Daochong with a face full of expectation. "I heard that Manway restaurant has a good dish." Li Daochong whispered, then looked up and said, "Then let's meet at the same place at noon." "Daochong, you want to go to Manway restaurant? Then let's meet at Manway restaurant at noon." Qiao Shima was afraid that she would make Li Daochong unhappy, so she quickly changed her words. I didn't want to go. You said you wanted to go. I said let's go to the same place. Li Daochong glanced at Qiao Shima from the corner of his eyes. After he finished speaking, he walked into the school gate without looking back. He looked like he did not want to say anything more. Looking at Li Daochong's receding figure, Qiao Shima revealed a strange expression. She actually felt a little disappointed. In the past, whenever Li Daochong saw her, he would lose his wits and behave abnormally. His face would turn red and he would be so nervous that he couldn't speak. He would just stare at her in a daze. Anyone could see that Li Daochong couldn't control his feelings for Qiao Shima. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was possessed. As time passed, Qiao Shima had gotten used to Li Daochong's attitude towards her. In the past, she even enjoyed it. After all, Li Daochong was the son of the head of the Li family, Li Tianyang. However, after Li Tianyang's accident, everything changed. Qiao Shima had an inexplicable rejection of Li Daochong for no reason. She didn't want to see him and looked down on him. Qiao Shima also blamed herself for being too selfish. However, the current situation was not something she could decide. Qiao Shima remembered that the last time she saw Li Daochong, he couldn't even speak clearly. He lowered his head all the time and blushed when he looked at her. However, just now, Li Daochong's performance had completely changed. The previous humility and insignificance were gone. His eyes were as clear as a pool of spring water, and his body naturally exuded a kind of indifferent confidence. Qiao Shima even suspected that she had found the wrong person. From the beginning to the end, Li Daochong didn't even look at her. He spoke smoothly and answered her questions fluently. He even tried to extort her. The cost of Manwei restaurant wasn't low. It was considered a high-end restaurant in Tianyuan City. Qiao Shima didn't return to her senses until Li Daochong's figure disappeared. She sat back in the car and didn't notice that an even more luxurious floating car was parked in the distance. In the car, Zhang Honglai was trembling with anger. Zhao Peng, who was sitting next to Zhang Honglai, was dumbfounded when he saw Li Daochong appear at the school gate unscathed. Peng, didn't you say that Li Daochong was most likely dead? What I saw just now was a ghost. Zhang Honglai suppressed his anger and asked coldly. Seeing that Qiao Shima took the initiative to stop Li Daochong and the two were talking so intimately, Zhang Honglai couldn't wait to rush up to Li Daochong and tear him apart. Young Master Zhang, something must have gone wrong. Just now, Chue told me that the soul-binding glyph was successfully planted on the card slave. Zhao Peng explained nervously. You can't do anything right. Looks like you aren't in a hurry to enter the elite class. I can only sell that spot to someone else. Zhang Honglai narrowed his eyes. Young Master Zhang, give me 2 more days. I will find a way to get rid of that brat. Zhao Peng hurriedly said. Get rid of? How? There are no classes in the afternoon. I will arrange for Ouyang Qian to lure that brat to the ancient castle in the ruins of the underground city. Then, I will release the short ghosts and bound spirit. Every year, some useless people will die there. Where did you get so many short ghosts and bound spirits? Zhang Honglai frowned. Young Master Zhang, I bought them all from the underground city's Shadow Serene Square. Zhao Peng replied honestly. The school forbids any contact with dark ghosts. Be careful. Don't say that you know me outside. Zhang Honglia's face was full of disgust. He felt that Zhao Peng's purchase of short ghosts and bound spirits was very shameful. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to get rid of Li Daochong without leaving any traces, he wouldn't have gotten involved with a hoodlum like Zhao Peng. Young Master Zhang, don't worry. I, Zhao Peng, will never betray you. Zhao Peng patted his chest. You wouldn't dare. If you don't succeed this time, don't even think about entering the elite class. Zhang Honglai reminded him. Young Master Zhang, if it doesn't work this time, I'll duel Li Daochong and beat him to death in the arena. Zhao Peng gritted his teeth. No one could stop him from becoming a cultivator, not even a fool like Li Daochong. Now, as long as Li Daochong died, he could enter the elite class to study and enjoy treatment that the ordinary class couldn't compare to. At this moment, in Zhao Peng's eyes, Li Daochong was a stumbling block on his path forward. He had to get rid of him. For a commoner like Zhao Peng, being able to enter Xiansong University's elite class was a great honor. Once he entered, he was practically half a cultivator. Even if he didn't have any great achievements in the future, as long as he could become a foundation establishment cultivator, he wouldn't have to worry about food and drink. What you do is your business. I only want results. Go. Zhang Honglai waved his hand. Zhao Peng eagerly got out of the car. After Li Daochong entered the school, he didn't go to class. Instead, he walked all the way to the library, recalling Qiao Shima's absurd request half a month ago. Marry for a month, then divorce. Qiao Shima had made such a request to avoid the Li family's pursuit of the betrothal gift. A small family like the Qiao family didn't have much capital to resist the Li family, so they could only use roundabout tactics to deal with the Li family's coercion. Marry and then divorce. Only the Qiao family could think of such a thing. As long as Li Daochong and Qiao Shima were married, the Li family wouldn't have any reason to say that the Qiao family had cheated them in marriage. As for the divorce, no one would care. That was a matter between two young people. Differences in personality, views, and dislike for each other were all very reasonable reasons. As long as they were married, Li Tianyang's betrothal gift to the Qiao family would be justified. The Li family wouldn't be able to get it back. The reason Qiao Shima dared to make such an unreasonable request to Li Daochong was because she was certain that Li Daochong was dead set on her. No matter what she asked, even if it was excessive, Li Daochong would agree. Half a month ago, Li Daochong had almost agreed. Fortunately, Yinping had been present at the time and interrupted the conversation in time. She had found an excuse to trick Li Daochong, who had almost lost his mind at the time, into leaving. Now that he thought about it, Li Daochong felt very guilty. If he had really agreed, wouldn't he have suffered a great loss? Now, Li Daochong didn't care about this marriage at all. He only thought about how to improve his strength as quickly as possible and concentrate on researching the hot-blooded level-up device. But whether it was cultivation or daily life, they couldn't do without money. Without money, even if Li Daochong had the hot-blooded level-up device, he wouldn't be able to become a cultivator. Therefore, a fake marriage wasn't out of the question, as long as the Qiao family was willing to pay. When he arrived at the entrance of the library, a light smile appeared on Li Daochong's face as he came up with an idea. Li Daochong spent the whole morning in the library flipping through the Federation Cultivation Encyclopedia. His predecessor's IQ was low and he didn't study hard, so there wasn't much information hidden in his brain. Li Daochong had no choice but to cram in so that he could have a better understanding of this world. The morning passed quickly. At lunchtime, Qiao Shima directly sent a message to Li Daochong and sent a car to pick him up at the school gate. In the hall on the third floor of Manwei Building, Li Daochong and Qiao Shima sat across from each other. Li Daochong, who was hungry, had already wolfed down most of the dishes on the table. More than 10 large bowls were stacked in front of him. From time to time, he would call for the waiter to add more food. Qiao Shima's seemingly calm expression was faintly discernible with a hint of surprise. If she didn't have something to ask of him, there was no way she would be able to sit down for lunch with a guy who ate like that. Qiao Shima wanted to speak a few times, but she was interrupted by Li Daochong's call for the waiter. From time to time, the diners in the other seats cast disdainful glances and made silent protests. This was a high-end hotel, not a slum food stall. How could this kind of barbarian enter a hotel to spend money? Qiao Shima couldn't wait to find a hole to crawl into. For the sake of her family's future, she could only endure. More than 10 minutes later, Li Daochong wiped his mouth in satisfaction and said, still not fully satisfied, "The taste is not bad." It's a pity that the season is not right. The meat of the snowfish is a bit overcooked. What a pity. The veins on Qiao Shima's forehead slightly bulged. The dishes on the table were all of the highest standard in Manway building. They were worth at least 1,000 Federation coins. This guy didn't leave a single grain of rice behind and was still being picky and sarcastic. Li Daochong, can you tell me the result of your consideration now? Qiao Shima tried to maintain a normal speaking speed as she asked. In her heart, she felt that Li Daochong's sloppy behavior was shameful. After hearing the question, Li Daochong's face looked calm, but his heart was in turmoil. His predecessor's fool was blinded by beauty. Qiao Shima obviously wanted to take advantage of the fool's infatuation with her to make unreasonable demands. That fool actually almost agreed. The Qiao family took the betrothal gift from his father. Now that his father was in trouble, the Qiao family didn't want to fulfill the marriage contract, nor did they want to return the betrothal gift. So they wanted to take advantage of the fool Li Daochong's infatuation with Qiao Shima to fake the marriage. Isn't what's mine my father's? In other words, I fake the marriage with you so that you can reasonably take what belongs to me? Li Daochong sneered in his heart. The Qiao family's wishful thinking was really good. The reason was reasonable, but Li Daochong knew that if he really asked for an exorbitant price, the Qiao family would definitely not agree. Although the betrothal gift that Li Tianyang gave was not small, it wasn't his. Most of it was given by the Li family. Now that the Li family had removed his father's name from the family tree and kicked Li Daochong out, Li Daochong naturally didn't want to take back the family's losses. However, Li Daochong absolutely wouldn't do something that didn't benefit him at all. He had to be paid for carrying bricks, not to mention giving his first time. No matter what, he had to make the Qiao family bleed a little. It just so happened that he was poor and needed money. I can agree to your fake marriage, but… Li Daochong paused halfway. But what? Qiao Shima immediately became nervous. But there's no free lunch in this world. I won't do it if there's no benefit. Li Daochong said directly. What do you want? Qiao Shima looked at Li Daochong's eyes with a sense of unfamiliarity. Was this still the fool that had lost his mind when he saw her? Chapter 5. Qiao Shima's body trembled. This was a huge sum of money. 200,000 Federation dollars was still acceptable. Spirit stones were extremely important cultivation resources. The market price for one piece was 1,000 Federation dollars, but most of the time, no one was willing to sell even 2,000 Federation dollars. Seeing that Qiao Shima didn't speak, Li Daochong shrugged. He wasn't in a hurry. It didn't matter to him whether Qiao Shima agreed or not. If she agreed, he would make a fortune. If she didn't, he wouldn't lose anything either. Hunting stone-horned cows was enough for his early cultivation. The Qiao family wasn't in a good situation either. It was said that the Qiao family had used up most of the betrothal gifts that his father had given them. Only the mine was still valuable. The Qiao family had no way to return the betrothal gifts given by Li Tianyang. If you don't want to, then forget it. Li Daochong stood up and was about to leave. Wait a minute. Can the price be lower? How about 50 pieces? Qiao Shima revealed a pitiful look. Her tone was even mixed with a hint of pleading, hoping that Li Daochong would be soft-hearted. I won't do it if it's one piece less. After saying that, Li Daochong quickly stood up from the chair and walked to the stairs without looking back. What a joke. The betrothal gifts that his father had given were worth more than 5 million Federation dollars, not including the mine. He only wanted 200,000 plus 100 spirit stones. If the Qiao family still refused to pay, Li Daochong felt that he needed to add fuel to the fire and make the Qiao family spit out everything they had taken, plus interest. Qiao Shima looked at Li Daochong in shock. She didn't expect that he would ignore her pleading. What a heartless guy. Qiao Shima paid the money and hurried to catch up with Li Daochong downstairs. I agree to your request. Set a date. The wedding must be grand. The elders of the Li family must also be present. Li Daochong glanced at Xiao Shima and said, "Tomorrow, I want to see a deposit of 100,000 Federation dollars in my spiritual internet wallet. If it can be transferred, let's set the date on the 24th of next month." Xiao Shima asked, "Can you do it a little earlier?" "On the 16th, your Li family will return the betrothal gifts on the 24th of next month." Li Daochong's expression didn't change. He nodded and said, "As long as the deposit is in the account, it doesn't matter if it's a few days earlier or later." "Oh right, there's also 20 spirit stones." Xiao Shima heaved a sigh of relief. "You'll receive the deposit and 20 spirit stones tomorrow." Li Daochong responded and turned to leave. Looking at Li Daochong's receding figure, Xiao Shima's heart was filled with mixed feelings. There was annoyance, doubt, and a trace of resentment. Not only had this guy become smarter, he had also become cold-blooded. Even if he had been stabbed recently. Could it be that this brat had forgotten? After returning to school, Li Daochong went straight to the library. "Qian, isn't that Li Daochong who jumped off the top of our teaching building 3 days ago?" Lu Mei's sharp eyes tugged at Ouyang Qian, who was walking with her on the tree-lined avenue. Lu Mei and Ouyang Qian were both students of the ordinary class of Xian University. Lu Mei's appearance was above average, while Ouyang Qian was more charming and enchanting. She was better than Lu Mei in all aspects. Ouyang Qian was worried that she couldn't find Li Daochong, but he had delivered himself to her door. Zhao Peng gave her a spirit stone in the morning and told her to bring Li Daochong to the castle at the end of the Deadwood Street in the underground city. She could leave after that, and he would give her another 2 spirit stones after that. Ouyang Qian came from an ordinary family. Neither of her parents were cultivators. She had been a tailor all her life. She was very lucky to be able to attend Xian University. For this reason, her family had spent most of their savings on Ouyang Qian's cultivation. Unfortunately, it was far from enough. Ouyang Qian had to find a way to earn money by herself. She sold her time on the spiritual net, accompanied people to chat, play, and cultivate for 100 Federation coins per hour. With her outstanding appearance, Ouyang Qian's business was good. However, no one had ever been so generous as to give her 3 spirit stones at once. Zhao Peng was generous, so Ouyang Qian naturally didn't want to disappoint her employer. 3 spirit stones as a reward for seducing a fool. This mission was simply too simple. It was simply a free gift. Ouyang Qian had absolute confidence in her own appearance. Not to mention inviting the brainless Li Daochong. As long as she opened her mouth, there was no male student in Profound Blue University that she couldn't invite. Even heroes had a weakness for beauties, let alone a fool. Ouyang Qian casually found an excuse to separate from Lu Mei and followed Li Daochong to the library. "Student Li, wait a moment." Seeing that there weren't many people around, Ouyang Qian ran up and grabbed Li Daochong's arm. Li Daochong was thinking about the content he had read in the morning. He felt that this world was too dangerous. If he wanted to protect himself, he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Suddenly, he was pulled by a beautiful girl that he didn't know. He was startled at first, then he looked at the beautiful girl with a baffled expression and asked, "You are? Student Li, you are really forgetful." "I am Ouyang Qian. Last semester, I was in the same class as you. This semester, I was transferred to ordinary class 2. You are still in class 1. Ouyang Qian was very surprised that Li Daochong didn't recognize her. "Oh, it's you. What's the matter?" Li Daochong absent-mindedly replied. In his heart, he only wanted to hurry to the library. Say. Li Daochong's reaction made Ouyang Qian very uncomfortable. Last semester, Li Daochong would stare blankly at her every time he saw her. Once, after class, they didn't pay attention and almost bumped into each other. At that time, Li Daochong was looking at her in a daze with a love-struck expression. At first glance, she knew that his brain wasn't working well. In Ouyang Qian's view, Li Daochong should be wild with joy when a beautiful girl like her took the initiative to hold his hand. Why was his reaction so indifferent? Everyone said that this guy's brain wasn't very bright, stupid, and perverted. He would speak nonsense when he saw a beautiful girl. Why didn't he even look at her now? Ouyang Qian's eyes inexplicably throbbed. The beauty's self-esteem was slightly impacted. She was a little unaccustomed to it. She was stunned for a moment before she replied. "Ah yes, I'm going to the underground city's Shadow Serene Square in the afternoon. That kind of place is a mix of crooks and honest folk. I don't dare to go alone. Can you accompany me?" Ouyang Qian looked at Li Daochong charmingly and continued to use the beauty trap. In her view, if a beauty took the initiative to make such an invitation, no man would refuse. They would definitely be overwhelmed by the favor and nod their heads like a chicken pecking at rice. They couldn't wait to go on a date with her alone. Facing a perverted fool, Ouyang Qian didn't feel the need to beat around the bush. She went straight to the point with her beauty. "I'm not free." Li Daochong thought that it was something important. When he heard this, he was puzzled. He pushed away Ouyang Qian's hand that was holding his arm and simply said this sentence. In his heart, he muttered, "What a joke, I'm not familiar with you. Why should I accompany you?" After saying that, he didn't even look at her and went straight to the library. Ouyang Qian, who was left behind, was dumbfounded. The beauty's arrogance was shattered at this moment. How could it be? Ouyang Qian couldn't believe that Li Daochong would actually refuse her invitation so straightforwardly. She suddenly felt that she had lost all face and the flames of her self-esteem were ignited. At Profound Firmament University, there were many boys who wanted to go on a date with her. Among them, there was no lack of tall, rich, and handsome men. How could she be ignored and refused by a fool? Ouyang Qian was unwilling to follow him to the library. No matter what, she had to get the 3 spirit stones. She didn't believe that she couldn't invite a poor fool. In Ouyang Qian's impression, Li Daochong had never read a book. He also couldn't study in class. The only reason he could enter Profound Firmament University was because he was the eldest son of the Li family, Li Tianyang's son. However, even if his background was so illustrious, this fool who didn't even have a spiritual vein could only stay in the ordinary class. It must be known that even if his aptitude was mediocre, as long as he was willing to spend money and put all his effort into accumulating cultivation resources, he could still enter the elite class. However, no matter how many cultivation resources were used on this fool, it was useless. Ouyang Qian looked down on Li Daochong from the bottom of her heart. Now that she was rejected by someone she looked down on, she was furious. Ouyang Qian didn't believe that Li Daochong would really reject her invitation. If he wasn't acting, then his brain must be acting up again. If this fool knew how to do 1,000,000 small. Unless a sow can climb a tree. She didn't believe that Li Daochong knew how to do 1,000,000 small. Ouyang Qian followed Li Daochong to the library and said, "Li Daochong, everyone knows what you are capable of. Stop acting. Follow me to the underground city. When we are back, I will treat you to a meal." After entering the library, Li Daochong walked to the encyclopedia bookshelf. This time, he did not choose 1,000,000 small. This was too slow. Li Daochong put on the mimic spirit helmet and entered the library's spiritual nexus. He used the mimic spirit helmet to follow the Federation's history. This way, he could get more information faster. When Li Daochong was about to put on the helmet, Ouyang Qian appeared again and said the same thing to him. Li Daochong frowned and felt disgusted. Why was this woman following him around like a fly? "Do you think I will listen to you just because you are a beauty? What kind of logic is this? Who wants to be treated to a meal by you?" Li Daochong was disgusted by this kind of self-righteous woman, whether in the past or now. "Get out of my way. Don't bother me," Li Daochong said softly. Ouyang Qian looked at Li Daochong in shock. Li Daochong shook off Ouyang Qian's hand and pressed a button on the mimic spirit helmet to connect to the spiritual nexus. As soon as he entered the spiritual nexus, Li Daochong immediately entered a vast universe. The torrent of history flowed quickly before his eyes. Human civilization started from nothing. From the past to the present, it had been 90,000 years. The end of the once glorious technological civilization was the beginning of the cultivation civilization. The civilization of life in the universe was divided into 7 levels. A Level 1 civilization could use the resources of a planet. A Level 2 civilization could use the resources of a star system. A Level 3 civilization could use all the resources of a star system. A Level 3 civilization was the peak of the technological civilization. From Level 4, the technological civilization made a qualitative leap into Level 4 civilization. Humans began to transcend the star system and use the resources of the universe. They also evolved to another level. Their individual life was greatly sublimated, and the cultivators were born. After the appearance of the cultivators, the consumption of resources increased exponentially. They began to expand rapidly, plundering other star systems to meet the needs of cultivation. Not only were the cultivators powerful, but they also had long lives. The human population, which was already very fast in reproduction, increased explosively. Many of the cultivators' descendants were still alive even after dozens of generations. Under the continuous expansion, the Pandora's box was finally opened by the cultivators. The Hades descended, and the ghosts and demons wreaked havoc, feeding on human souls. The cultivators plundered all kinds of cultivation resources in the universe, while the ghosts and demons of the Hades plundered human souls. Human lives were their survival resources. If there was yang, there would be yin. If there was a positive, there would be a negative. Yin and yang complemented each other. Since then, the netherworld race and the human race had been fighting for 3,000 years. Until now, the human territory had shrunk to 1/3 of its original size, and it was still shrinking. Not only that, the netherworld race's infiltration was silent. Countless colonized planets in the major star systems controlled by the human race were haunted at every moment. Li Daochong saw this and immediately logged out of the spiritual nexus. He now knew that his father, who was stationed at the Sirius star, was fighting against the netherworld race. There were really ghosts in the world? And they were actually a race? This world was much more dangerous than it seemed. Li Daochong secretly exclaimed that he was lucky to be born in the Li family. His father was Li Tianyang, and he lived in the 4th ring star system of the Federation. If he lived outside the 4th ring, he might not even be able to live to the age of 18. He suddenly felt a sense of crisis. After reading the history of the Federation, Li Daochong immediately entered the introductory cultivation books and continued to browse. After reading, he felt that there were no books that were helpful to him. However, he had a new understanding of the range of spirit energy from the 1st to the 9th level of the refinement stage. After reading, Li Daochong could roughly determine that his current cultivation level was at the 1st level of the refinement stage. In other words, the 1st level in the hot-blooded level-up device was equivalent to the 1st level of the refinement stage. Chapter 6. A question arose in Li Daochong's mind. Leveling up required soul power. The last time he leveled up, it was that unlucky dwarf that invaded his body and activated the hot-blooded upgrader. It was absorbed by the hot-blooded upgrader, and by a freak combination of factors, he leveled up to level 1. From this, it could be seen that no dark ghost could possess him. This was equivalent to him gaining a passive skill. So the only way to level up was to kill dark ghosts? Li Daochong was somewhat troubled. If this was the case, where could he find dark ghosts? If there really were, they could only be found on the battlefield between the human race and the Hades. With his current strength, let alone the battlefield, he couldn't even join the army. The Federation's cultivator army had a minimum requirement of Qi refinement level 7. Of course, he could also go to the Hades without joining the army, but doing so would be courting death. Not to mention that Li Daochong couldn't even be considered a beginner, even if his father, Li Tianyang, was a Jin Dan great cultivator. He would only be throwing his life away. Besides killing dark ghosts, was there any other way to obtain soul force? At present, there was no answer to this question. Li Daochong realized that the only way to level up was to kill dark ghosts. That night, Silver Vase had been possessed by a dwarf ghost. Li Daochong thought about it and concluded that it could only have been the Black Hand. But how had Black Hand obtained a dwarf ghost? Li Daochong immediately thought of the several markets in Tianyuan City, but he quickly ruled them out. The Federation government did not allow unauthorized contact with the underworld. Anyone caught would be arrested by the Federation's Cultivator Security Bureau for investigation. As Li Daochong pondered and browsed through the spirit net, a book called Dungeon Strategy entered his sight. Dungeon? Didn't Ouyang Qian just ask me to accompany her to this place? Li Daochong had heard of it before. It was said that it was a gray area of the Blue Bay Star, a city built underground. Out of curiosity, Li Daochong opened the Dungeon Strategy Guide and was attracted by the content. The underground city had everything. Anything that could not see the light of day could exist there. Gambling, drug trafficking, assassinations, gangs, these illegal activities that were banned by the Federation government could be seen everywhere in the underground city. There were many black markets in the underground city. The shadow-secluded square was one of the biggest black markets. You could buy anything you wanted there. There were only things you couldn't think of, but there was nothing you couldn't buy. This naturally included goods like Dark Ghost. If Dark Ghost could really be bought, wouldn't it be very easy for him to increase his strength? Li Daochong's interest in the underground city was piqued. After reading the strategy guide, Li Daochong had a better understanding of the dungeon. However, the strategy guide did not mention where the entrance to the dungeon was. Li Daochong recalled that Ouyang Qian had asked him to accompany her to the shadow-secluded square. This woman seemed to know where the entrance was. He immediately logged out of the book and the spiritual nexus. As he took off the spirit-simulating helmet, Li Daochong regretted refusing Ouyang Qian. She was probably long gone. Li Daochong was thinking about where to find Ouyang Qian, but when he took off the helmet, he saw Ouyang Qian sitting next to him, looking at him with a sullen expression. She didn't leave? After being shaken off by Li Daochong again, Ouyang Qian still thought that he was putting on an act. She sat next to him in a fit of pique, waiting to see how long this fool would keep up the act. However, 4 hours had passed, and Li Daochong had not come down from the spiritual net of the library. The green light on his helmet was constantly shining, which meant that his mental power was unusually active. He was most likely reading books in the Sea of Books illusion using spiritual aura. This kind of reading method could make one feel immersive, like watching a holographic fantasy movie. The reward of 3 spiritual stones was too tempting for Ouyang Qian. No matter how unhappy she was, she still stayed and waited for 4 hours. Seeing that Li Daochong had finally logged off from the spiritual nexus, Ouyang Qian wanted to continue inviting him. But she couldn't bring herself to say it. She felt that she would definitely be rejected. For the first time, Ouyang Qian felt such a strong sense of defeat. Li Daochong took off the helmet and saw that Ouyang Qian hadn't left. She was still sitting next to him. At first, he was happy, but then he felt that something was wrong. He was the son of a traitor who was ostracized by the whole class. How could he let a beauty chase him all the way and wait for him for a few hours without any complaints? It was a little strange. It was obviously abnormal. Li Daochong became vigilant when things were out of the ordinary. But after thinking about it, Li Daochong couldn't think of any conflicts between him and Ouyang Qian. Could it be that she was just teasing him? This was the only reason Li Daochong could think of. In the past month, there had been a lot of people teasing him. If he stood by the window in a daze, he might get his pants pulled off. Li Daochong laughed at himself in his heart, wondering if he was being too careful. It was broad daylight and the world was clear. Was he still afraid that a girl would harm him? After thinking for a while, he opened his mouth and said, "I'll accompany you to the underground city." Ouyang Qian was stunned. She looked at Li Daochong as if she was looking at an idiot. What the hell? This guy's brain really wasn't working well. Just now, he was still acting all pretentious. Now, he's doing a 180-degree turn and wants to go with me. For the sake of the 3 spiritual stones, Ouyang Qian had no choice but to suppress her anger. She stood up and said, "Let's go." Li Daochong followed Ouyang Qian out of the library and to the school's parking lot. The latter drove a starlight-grade spiritual float out of Heaven Vast University. 20 minutes later, they were out of Tianyuan City. They flew a few hundred kilometers north and entered the Lanwu mountain range. Finally, they landed in the depths of a canyon. There was nothing special about it from the outside. It was surrounded by dense trees and lush vines. When the spiritual float passed through the layers of vegetation, a flat and wide cave appeared before them. There was a completely different world under the canyon's dense forest. Ouyang Qian drove the spiritual float to the edge of the cave and stopped there. Li Daochong could feel a wave of spiritual energy around them. There was a checkpoint at the entrance of the cave. There were more than 10 spiritual float cars in front of Ouyang Qian. They had to pay a toll before they could enter. Ouyang Qian paid 50 Federation coins before she was allowed to enter. Ouyang Qian smoothly passed through the checkpoint and entered the cave. There was a huge tunnel inside that stretched for several kilometers. There were always bright lights around it. They could see the light at the other end of the cave. When the spiritual float car rushed into the light, Li Daochong was shocked by what he saw. A magnificent and vast underground city appeared before him. He couldn't see the end of it. The entire structure was almost identical to Tianyuan City. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a roof above them, and that the surroundings were pitch black and only the city was brightly lit, Li Daochong would have mistaken this place for Tianyuan City. Seeing Li Daochong's surprised expression, Ouyang Qian, who had been silent the entire time, asked, "First time here? And do you come here often?" Li Daochong replied with a question. "How could that be? I wouldn't come here unless I had no other choice. It's too dark and dangerous. Don't you know this is a place where gangs gather?" Ouyang Qian exclaimed. Her disdain for Li Daochong increased. This idiot was the son of the head of the Li family, one of the 4 great families of Blue Bay Star. Yet, he had never even come to an underground city before. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Unfortunately, his brain wasn't bright enough and he didn't know how to use the silver spoon. Ouyang Qian didn't want to talk too much with Li Daochong. She increased the speed of the floating vehicle. After a while, they arrived at the end of an old street at the edge of the underground city. An old castle sat at the end of the street. The castle was covered in moss and looked old and dilapidated. "Aren't you going to the Shadow Serene Square? Where is this place?" Li Daochong was puzzled. "Someone told me to bring you here. As for the reason, I don't know. I'm only responsible for bringing you here." "Get out of the car," Ouyang Qian said directly. "Who?" "Xiaopeng." "Him? Why are you looking for me?" Li Daochong didn't have a clue. He remembered this person as a classmate of normal class 1. He didn't have much contact with him. They hadn't spoken for more than half a year. Xiaopeng didn't talk much with anyone. "I said I don't know. I'm just a guide. Xiaopeng told me to give you this after I brought you here. Here, take it." Ouyang Qian took out a sound transmission card and handed it to Li Daochong. Li Daochong took the sound transmission card with a puzzled expression and inserted it into his wristwatch. "Li Daochong, if you want to know about your father, enter the castle. The answer you want is inside. Your father was framed." Xiao Peng's voice rang out. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound transmission card shattered. Li Daocheng's body trembled. He opened the car door and rushed into the castle. Seeing Li Daocheng rush into the castle, Ouyang Qian muttered, "Isn't this the Deadwood Castle that was rumored to be haunted? Why did Zhao Peng send this fool here? Strange." Ouyang Qian was about to drive away, but when she stepped on the spirit door's pedal, the vehicle made a strange noise. Then, it fell to the ground with a thud and stopped moving. It broke down? Ouyang Qian's heart skipped a beat. It broke down in a place like this? Whoosh! A gust of wind blew past, and a terrifying sound came from every window of the castle. A white shadow flashed past, and Ouyang Qian's small face turned pale. She pressed the start button with all her might, but the vehicle's spirit hair machine didn't respond. It was as if it had been scrapped. Ouyang Qian immediately regretted driving the vehicle into the castle's courtyard. She had always been suspicious of hauntings. Blue Bay Star was located in the fourth ring of the Federation. How could there be dark ghosts? Before Ouyang Qian could react, the vehicle began to shake violently. Then, with a bang in her head, she fainted. At the same time, Li Daocheng, who had just entered the castle, was surrounded by 3 dwarf ghosts. Li Daocheng's expression froze. He knew he had fallen into a trap. Zhao Peng didn't want to talk to him about his father. He clearly wanted to take his life. Ouyang Qian's entanglement and the sound transmission card were all to lure him into the abandoned castle in the underground city. However, Li Daocheng wasn't afraid of the 3 dwarf ghosts. Instead, he was overjoyed. He had been worried about where to find these dark ghosts, but they had delivered themselves to his doorstep. Even if there were 30 of them, Li Daocheng would still take them, let alone 3. The more the better. Li Daocheng was about to use the same trick again. He would use soul lure to lure the 3 dwarf ghosts into his body so that the blood-boiling upgrader could absorb them. Who would have thought that before Li Daocheng could use the soul luring technique, the 3 short ghosts would rush towards Li Daocheng like hungry ghosts and enter his body. It was as if someone was controlling them. Chapter 7. Young Master Jean, this idiot is dead for sure. With 3 dwarves possessing him, even if he doesn't die, he'll become an idiot. Zhao Peng hid behind a wooden door and used the spirit eye on his watch to send the image of the 3 dwarves invading Li Daocheng's body to Zhan Honglai. After sending the image, Zhao Peng immediately left the castle and carried the unconscious Ouyang Qian into the castle. She had already been possessed by the bound spirit and was dead for sure. He tore apart a part of Ouyang Qian's clothes and laid it at Li Daocheng's feet, making it look like a man and woman were doing something indescribable and were killed by the dark ghost. After doing all this, Zhao Peng quietly left Deadwood Castle and quickly left. Recently, this abandoned castle had been rumored to be haunted. Zhao Peng felt that something was strange when he hid inside, so it wasn't a good place to stay. Zhao Peng was reluctant to get rid of Ouyang Qian, but he didn't want to leave behind any future troubles. After all, he was the one who had asked Ouyang Qian to bring Li Daocheng here. No matter what, Li Daocheng was still a member of the Li family. Even if he was kicked out of the family and really died, the Li family couldn't just ignore it. If they investigated and found Ouyang Qian, then he would be exposed and the Li family wouldn't let him off. If he had to blame someone, then he could only blame Ouyang Qian for being greedy. This girl was so beautiful that killing her would be a pity. However, as long as he entered the elite class, who knew how many beauties would throw themselves at him? Thinking that he would soon enter the elite class and become half a cultivator, Zhao Peng was incomparably excited. He left the castle, turned left and right, and disappeared into the darkness. Only a few seconds after Zhao Peng left, Li Daocheng's eyes flashed and his wooden expression returned to normal. Killed 3 skeleton dwarves. Obtained soul power. Host has leveled up to level 2. Do you want to learn the psychokinesis battle technique? Li Daochong felt the spiritual energy in his body increase and his vision in the dark became clearer. Before, he could only see 30 to 40 feet, but now his vision had doubled. His entire body felt refreshed, as if he had been enlightened. It was an indescribable comfort. Li Daochong was certain that he had already reached the second level of qi refining, and was only one step away from the top students in the common class. The top 10 students of the common class were all at the third layer of the qi refining realm. The minimum requirement for entering the elite class as a freshman was the fourth layer of qi refining. What was even more frightening was that there were only 15 people in the superclass. The weakest of them was at the 6th level of qi refining, and every one of them had the spiritual pulse of Xian heaven. They were born with extraordinary talents, and it was only a matter of time before they would become the rising stars of the Shenghua Federation. Not to mention the elite classes and the elite classes, even the second layer of qi refining in the common classes was something that Li Daochong could only dream of in the past. After successfully leveling up, Li Daochong was extremely excited. He wished he could absorb a few more skeleton dwarves. Leaving the knowledge sea, Li Daochong stood in place and looked around. The empty hall of the ancient castle was silent. Obviously, there were no other creatures other than the 3 skeleton dwarves. Li Daochong was not in a hurry to learn the psychokinesis battle technique. Based on his previous experience, if he chose to practice it, he would immediately use up too much of his strength. If he was unlucky, he might even pass out due to mental exhaustion. Suddenly, a low roar broke the silence. Die, die, all of you must die. Li Daochong's expression froze. He looked down and saw Ouyang Qian lying at his feet with her clothes disheveled. At this moment, she opened her eyes. Her gaze shot out a fierce cold light, and her whole body was filled with killing intent. Whoosh! Ouyang Qian floated up without any support. Behind her, an illusory white shadow appeared. Bound spirit? Li Daochong immediately judged. Skeleton dwarves and bound spirits were the lowest type of ghost among dark ghosts. Skeleton dwarves had no consciousness. They were a type of dark ghost that clung to the bones. Bound spirits had a bit of consciousness, but that pitifully little consciousness was a kind of resentment. Besides deep hatred, there was nothing else. Bound spirits were a bit stronger than skeleton dwarves, but they could only be bound within a certain range, and could not move freely. Once they left this range, they would return to their original form and become skeleton dwarf. Bound spirits evolved from skeleton dwarf. They were the transitional product of skeleton dwarves evolving into imp. Like a caterpillar breaking out of its cocoon and becoming a butterfly, bound spirits were the cocoon breaking out of the imp. Facing the controlled Ouyang Qian, Li Daochong did not panic. No matter what, he was still a second-layer qi refining cultivator. Once he had spiritual qi in his body, he would have the ability to deal with the lowest level of dark ghosts. Without spiritual energy, humans would not be able to hit the nether ghost. With spiritual energy, the nether ghost's illusory body would become tangible. Dark ghosts were dead souls with death qi, while spiritual qi was living qi. They countered each other. Ouyang Qian formed a claw with one hand and clawed at Li Daochong's face. Pa! Li Daochong easily caught Ouyang Qian's wrist. Even Li Daochong was a little surprised that he could grab it so easily. Ouyang Qian's other hand attacked even more fiercely, but Li Daochong dodged to the side. In a few breaths of time, the controlled Ouyang Qian attacked Li Daochong with all sorts of anxious and hateful attack. She scratched, kicked, slapped, bit, and even kicked Li Daochong's lower body. Whether it was strength or speed, she was definitely above second-layer qi refining, especially her speed. Even so, Li Daochong easily dodged or blocked all of Ouyang Qian's attacks. Only defending and not attacking did not mean that Li Daochong did not have the ability to fight back. He just wanted to see what kind of changes he had undergone and how strong he was. Logically speaking, A second layer qi refining cultivator should not be completely confident in dealing with a bound spirit. After more than a dozen attacks, Ouyang Qian did not even touch Li Daochong's hair. In a battle that should have ended in a draw, Li Daochong had the absolute advantage. Ouyang Qian's every move was under his control. Li Daochong used the dodging and blocking techniques in the basic cultivation method with ease. It was as if his body had been downloaded with a program. Any attack made by the opponent would be easily countered. Li Daochong finally understood the importance of basic cultivation method. He had underestimated this ordinary technique. He had actually looked down on it before. It seemed that he had high standards but low skills. Building a solid foundation was the most fundamental thing in any field. Basic cultivation method was to lay the most solid foundation in fighting. Li Daochong, who understood, smiled and licked his lip. He raised his fist and gathered all the spirit energy in his body into his fist. He was going to fight back. Bang! A punch landed on Ouyang Qian's lower abdomen. Ah, ah! A hair-raising scream came from Ouyang Qian's body. The white shadow behind her shook violently. Li Daochong sneered and punched again, this time even more fiercely. Wah! Ouyang Qian spat out a mouthful of acid. The white shadow was sent flying out of her body. Li Daochong ignored Ouyang Qian, who had gone limp, and chased after the white shadow. An introductory fist technique that the instructor had taught him in the first semester of his first year of university naturally appeared in his mind. Ghost-slaying fist. As long as the fist contained spirit energy, dark ghosts could be killed. This fist technique was very simple. It was one of the few low-level fist techniques that the fool Li Daochong had memorized. But even if he had memorized it, it would have been useless. Without spirit energy, it would have been useless even if he had used it. But now it was a different story. Li Daochong punched 3 times in an instant. Bang bang bang! Ghost-slaying triple punch. But the bound spirit was only hit once, and the other 2 punches missed. But even with just 1 punch, the death aura on its body was greatly reduced. Spirit energy fist dealt damage to low-level dark ghosts. The stronger the punch, the more spirit energy would be injected into the bound spirit. If Li Daochong had enough strength, he could have blown the bound spirit to pieces with 1 punch. Li Daochong found it strange. All 3 of his punches contained spirit energy, so why did only 1 punch hit, and the other 2 seem to hit air? How could he miss with spirit energy? Li Daochong was a little dumbfounded. Although the bound spirit wasn't defeated with 1 punch, its white body became translucent, and its ghostly body was on the verge of collapse. Its empty eyes looked at Li Daochong with fear. It was like a little white rabbit seeing a big bad wolf. It was an innate fear. The bound spirit didn't dare to fight with Li Daochong anymore. It desperately wanted to escape, even if it was demoted to a skeleton dwarf. It wanted to get away from this terrifying person. Li Daochong wouldn't let the bound spirit escape, let alone demote it. That would affect the amount of soul power it could absorb. Li Daochong wanted to know how much spirit energy he could get from absorbing the bound spirit. It would definitely be more than the skeleton dwarf. Seeing that the bound spirit wanted to fly up, Li Daochong threw away the question of why only 1 punch hit. He jumped up with all his strength and kicked at the bound spirit. This time the attack hit. A stream of spirit energy entered the bound spirit's body. The bound spirit couldn't withstand the burning spirit energy and collapsed into white smoke. A wisp of black smoke remained and entered Li Daochong's body. Will it reach level 3? Li Daochong was looking forward to it. After a while, the blood spirit upgrader didn't give any notification. Li Daochong only felt that the amount of spirit energy in his body had increased a lot, but he was still at the 2nd level of qi refining. It seemed that he had touched the edge of the 3rd level and reached the peak of the 2nd level, but he still hadn't leveled up. Li Daochong's mouth twitched. The 2nd level of qi refining requires so much more spirit energy than the 1st level. The amount of spirit energy produced by a bound spirit is at least the amount of spirit energy produced by 2 skeleton dwarfs, but I still haven't leveled up. Li Daochong had just finished talking to himself when he suddenly felt a vibration in his body. Then his mind became clear and the turbid spirit energy seemed to have been purified. Then, the 9 withered basic spirit veins in his body changed a little. Like the dry earth moistened by rain, they slowly stretched and became moist. One of the basic spirit veins constantly swelled and spirit energy slowly flowed into it. Then, the basic spirit vein was completely opened and began to pulse strongly, continuously sending spirit energy to the spirit root seed at the end of the spirit vein. Li Daochong's depression from not leveling up disappeared in an instant. His heart was filled with ecstasy. He had finally opened one of his basic spirit veins. This meant that he was no longer a cripple. Yay! Li Daochong cheered in his heart. The joy of leveling up and opening one of his spirit veins didn't make Li Daochong too excited. Today, Zhao Peng wanted to kill him. If it wasn't for the blood spirit upgrader in his body being activated, the 3 skeleton dwarfs would have chewed him into pieces. Thinking about it, Gang Ming's provocation was most likely related to Zhao Peng. Today's matter and the kick that Silver Bottle suffered wouldn't be forgotten so easily. Li Daochong's eyes flashed with a cold light. Chapter 8. Ouyang Qian was still unconscious. Li Daochong felt her pulse and confirmed that she was fine. She was just mentally exhausted and was about to carry her out of the castle. Suddenly, a cold chill swept out from the depths of the castle and engulfed Li Daochong. He felt cold all the way from his neck to his heels. It was as if a pair of eyes were looking at him from behind. Li Daochong's body stiffened and he couldn't help but shiver. This deathly cold aura was extremely terrifying. It actually caused Li Daochong to feel fear. The deathly aura within the cold aura made Li Daochong almost unable to breathe. Some kind of darkness in the depths of the ancient castle seemed to be slowly awakening. Something was strange. Li Daochong turned around and looked. There was nothing in the darkness, but the terrifying aura was getting stronger and stronger. Under the pressure of the deathly chill, Li Daochong couldn't move. There was an invisible force in the void that kept him in place. Damn it, what the hell is this? Li Daochong cursed and urged all the spiritual energy in his body to break free. The deathly chill seemed to want to completely swallow Li Daochong. This kind of pressure made Li Daochong feel like he was on the verge of death. The spiritual energy in his body trembled. In this crisis, his strong desire to survive suddenly erupted. The spiritual energy in Li Daochong's body was continuously compressed until it was almost in a liquefied state. Scram! Li Daochong roared and the veins on his body bulged. He poured all his spiritual energy into a punch in the direction of the deathly chill. Dong! This punch seemed to have hit an invisible wall. The shackles on Li Daochong's body also disappeared under this punch. He could move again. Not only that, but the deathly chill also weakened. Li Daochong, who could move again, didn't dare to hesitate. He picked up Ouyang Qian and ran out of the castle. The floating car was still in the courtyard. Li Daochong put Ouyang Qian in the front passenger seat and hurriedly drove the car away from Deadwood Castle. Not long after Li Daochong left, a void door in the corner of the castle hall gradually opened. A huge and terrifying deathly chill gushed out. Li Daochong inexplicably felt that the source of the deathly chill was coming from here. An extremely beautiful woman with a pale face and many scars on her body fell out. Her temperament was as cold as ice. She was in a sorry state and a bear-shaped ghost chased after her. It was a complete ghost. If Li Daochong hadn't left, he would have been shocked to see this extremely beautiful woman. This woman was a specially invited lecturer of Tsongshuan University and also the bodyguard of the Blue Bay Star's Heaven's Pride, Augustine. She was also a celebrity of Blue Bay Star, Chu Qianyue. Li Daochong's status was comparable to the Blue Bay Star's Heaven's Pride, Augustine. They were both sons of the patriarchs of the 4 great clans of Blue Bay Star. However, Li Daochong was born with a mysterious heaven spirit vein and reached the foundation establishment stage before the age of 20. He was now at the advanced foundation establishment stage at the age of 28 and was only a step away from the Jindan stage. The only difference between Li Daochong and Augustine was their cultivation talent. One was in hell and the other was in heaven, which created the gap between them. The former was almost reduced to a beggar, while the latter stood in the clouds overlooking all living beings. If Li Daochong was born with unparalleled talent, even if something happened to his father, Li Tianyang, he wouldn't be implicated. The Federation's Cultivator Safety Bureau wouldn't even investigate him. There was a shortage of talents everywhere. At the same time Chu Qianhua fell out of the void gate, she looked outside the window at the low-grade floating vehicle flying away. Her pair of emotionless, ice-cold eyes flashed with curiosity and doubt. Just now, if it wasn't for that youngster breaking the void barrier with a punch, she wouldn't have been able to come back from that damned place. Such a weak youngster actually had the ability to break space. Chu Qianhua's expression froze and her thoughts were in a daze. "Little guy, thank you," Chu Qianhua whispered. After saying that, Chu Qianhua's delicate body turned around. With a thought, she shouted, "Seal." The void gate closed in an instant. The wailing and howling coming from inside stopped abruptly. Those dark shadows that were trying to jump out from behind the void gate disappeared. Only the bear-shaped ghost was still roaring and rushing towards Chu Qianhua. The latter flicked her slender finger and spiritual energy burst out. Bang! A golden flame suddenly rose and engulfed the bear-shaped ghost. Huff! Huff! Chu Qianhua was gasping for breath. This time she sneaked into the border of the Hades and unexpectedly ran into a red shadow ghost. If she hadn't brought the supersonic shuttle, she probably wouldn't have been able to come back. Chu Qianhua perceived several powerful auras rushing over from different directions of the underground city. She knew that the abnormal aura in the Deadwood Castle had been discovered by expert. Immediately, Chu Qianhua flashed and disappeared as if she had never been there. The hall of the Deadwood Castle was restored to its original state. Only the remaining deathly cold aura was slowly dissipating. On the other side, Li Daochong's whole body was soaked in cold sweat. His hands holding the steering wheel couldn't help but tremble. The existence hidden in the ancient castle had scared him so much that he couldn't breathe. That kind of power wasn't something he could contend against. After driving the floating vehicle to the edge of the underground city, Li Daochong stopped the vehicle at the edge of the underground city. After some adjustment, Li Daochong's nervous mood eased a little. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. What was hidden in the ancient castle? That level of deathly aura was far beyond that of low-level dark ghosts. The Blue Bay Star was clearly within the Shenghua Federation's 4th ring star. The Hades shouldn't be able to reach here. However, the terrifying aura generated in the ancient castle just now was definitely released by some kind of powerful dark ghost. Could it be that powerful dark ghosts were starting to appear in the Blue Bay Star? Didn't the cultivators in the underground city notice? Li Daochong couldn't figure it out. With his current strength, he couldn't go back and investigate, so he could only give up. Even if a powerful dark ghost appeared, it wasn't something he could interfere with right now. It was better to leave it to the Federation's government to worry about. Li Daochong waited for a while, but Ouyang Qian still hadn't woken up. Seeing that it was getting late, he gave up on going to the Shadow Serene Square today. Besides, he didn't have any money to buy anything. In any case, he now knew the location of the underground city. He could come back later if he needed to. With that thought, Li Daochong directly drove the floating vehicle to the underground tunnel. After leaving the underground city, Li Daochong followed the vehicle's GPS and drove toward Tianyuan City. An hour later, he finally saw the brightly lit Tianyuan City. "Don't come over!" With a scream, Ouyang Qian woke up from her coma. When she saw that she was sitting in the floating vehicle, and that Tianyuan City was right in front of her, her panic gradually calmed down. However, her head hurt badly, and her body felt weak and uncomfortable. Ouyang Qian's last memory was of a white shadow invading her body. After that, she couldn't remember anything. Why are you in my vehicle? Didn't you enter the ancient castle? Ouyang Qian lowered her head and saw that her clothes had been torn apart, revealing a large patch of skin. She immediately frowned and looked at Li Daochong with vigilance. Can't I come out after entering? Li Daochong didn't want to explain anything to Ouyang Qian, so he coldly replied. Speaking of which, this woman could be considered Zhao Peng's accomplice. However, Zhao Peng wanted to get rid of her, which meant that she didn't know the truth and was only being used by Zhao Peng. Otherwise, Li Daochong wouldn't have saved her. Why did Zhao Peng want to kill him? Li Daochong didn't quite understand. There had to be a reason, and he wouldn't kill him for no reason. As for what the reason was, Li Daochong had no clue at the moment. Tell me what happened. I remember that something attacked me. Did you do something to my vehicle? Ouyang Qian questioned. Her clothes had clearly been torn apart by someone. It was very likely that this idiot Li Daochong was lusting after her beauty. As soon as she finished speaking, Ouyang Qian rushed forward, almost slamming her head into the windshield of the vehicle. Li Daochong slammed on the brakes, causing the vehicle to come to a halt. Go back by yourself, he said before getting out of the vehicle. Hey! Ouyang Qian called out. She wanted to chase after him, but her body was too weak to do so. She felt as if she had drunk a drug. Li Daochong turned a deaf ear to her words. As soon as he got out of the vehicle, he ran away and disappeared into the twilight, leaving behind a sullen Ouyang Qian. Li Daochong, you idiot! How dare you drug me? I won't let you off! Ouyang Qian shouted in the direction Li Daochong had disappeared. The only response she received was the sound of a floating vehicle's horn from Tianyuan City. By the time Li Daochong returned home, it was already close to 11 o'clock. Yin Ping was still awake, sitting in the living room, watching the midnight entertainment program on her astral vision. However, she was absent-minded and worried. Seeing Li Daochong return, Yin Ping's expression relaxed. Young master, you're back. I'll heat up some food for you. Li Daochong was indeed starving. He grunted and plopped down on the sofa, his body weak. The terror in the castle had yet to completely disappear. Yin Ping was very nimble. She quickly heated up the food and brought it to him. It was a large plate of braised stonehorn beef. Li Daochong gobbled down everything. Only then did he feel better, and the chill in his body gradually dissipated. After clearing away the dishes, Yin Ping was so tired that she went back to her room to sleep. Li Daochong returned to his room and opened the hot-blooded upgrader. The interface was still showing whether or not to learn telekinesis combat, waiting for the host to make a choice. Li Daochong wasn't in a hurry to learn it immediately. Instead, he calmed himself down and tried to recall the basic settings of the upgrade system when he designed Hot-Blooded Glory. There were a total of 6 classes in this mobile game. However, when the character was first created, they were all the same. For the first 9 levels, there were no classes and the basic stats were the same. It was only after level 9 that there would be a differentiation, and the player could choose their favorite class according to their preferences. The hot-blooded cultivator class didn't exist. Therefore, the hot-blooded upgrader that activated in Li Daochong's body wasn't the upgrade system he was familiar with. There was no basic cultivation method skill, but there was telekinesis combat. This was the skill that Li Daochong should have first appeared in the upgrade system he programmed. This skill only had one function, which was to increase the accuracy of attacks. Li Daochong recalled the time when he was dealing with the bound spirit in the castle. When he used the Spirit Slayer punch 3 times in a row, only one of his punches hit the bound spirit. The other 2 punches missed. From this, it could be seen that his accuracy was quite low. It seemed like it would take some time to thoroughly explore the hot-blooded upgrader. Li Daochong knew that it was useless to think too much. He still had to prove it with practice. Right now, he had to learn telekinesis combat first. Then, Li Daochong selected yes on the interface. In an instant, Li Daochong felt the burden on his body increase tremendously. He felt dizzy, his head buzzed, and his spirit was dispirited. The psychokinesis battle technique completed. Skill level 1. As the voice sounded in his mind, an unstoppable drowsiness swept over him. Li Daochong's body tilted, and he fell unconscious on the bed. Chapter 9. The student in the last row, please answer my question. Blizzard Ice stood on the podium and stared at the familiar-looking male student in the back row with a gloomy face. Snore, snore. The sound of heavy breathing echoed in the big classroom. There were more than 100 students in the big classroom with different expressions. Some were disgusted, some were watching a good show, and some were looking down on him. In short, all the students who came to the big class today turned to look at the guy in the last row who was snoring with one hand on his head. How annoying! If you don't want to learn, don't come to class. You're wasting everyone's time. A girl said with an arrogant face. This idiot actually dares to snore in Blizzard Ice's class. What's there to be afraid of? Don't you know that a dead pig is not afraid of boiling water? Some students whispered in each other's ears. The one who was snoring was none other than Li Daochong, who had fallen asleep after learning the psychokinesis battle technique last night. If it wasn't for Yin Ping who woke him up in the morning, he would have been absent from class today. After learning the psychokinesis battle technique, Li Daochong was dispirited and only wanted to sleep. In the morning, he ate a big pot of stone horn beef soup made by Yin Ping, but it didn't help. He was still yawning. When he arrived at school, Li Daochong forced his tired body to attend the big class. Originally, he wanted to listen to this important public class: Spiritual Brain Talisman Formation and Spiritual Base Programming. However, once he sat down, Li Daochong couldn't take it anymore. His eyelids were fighting to stay awake. He supported his head with one hand, but he still couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell asleep in a short while. Lu Feng, who sat next to Li Daochong, didn't know what to do. He had already stepped on Li Daochong 3 times. This kid didn't have any reaction at all. Instead, his snoring became even more rhythmic. Snore, snore, pft. The students burst into laughter, but they tried to suppress their laughter. They didn't dare to laugh too loudly. No one dared to go overboard in Blizzard Ice's class. Blizzard Ice was famous for being merciless. No matter who you were or what kind of background you had, whoever dared to cause trouble in her class would end up in a miserable state. Some of the freshmen who had just entered the school last semester did not believe in heresy. Relying on the fact that their father was the captain of the City Appearance Squadron of the City Administration of Tianyuan City, the head of the department in charge of the cultivator peddlers who set up stalls everywhere in Tianyuan City to trade low-level daily magical equipment. Although his position was not high, his power was not small. Many low-level cultivators had tried to curry favor with him. When the freshman was in Blizzard Ice class, he used his intelligent wristwatch to video chat with someone on the SpiritNet. Blizzard Ice went berserk on the spot. He summoned his flying sword and cut the guy's latest intelligent wristwatch into pieces. He then froze the guy with an ice seal and dragged him to the door of the teaching office. The next day, the new student who thought he had a tyrannical backer announced to the whole school that he was expelled. Blizzard Ice's expression became even more unsightly. He walked down from the podium and came to Li Daochong's seat. He gathered spiritual energy between his fingers and pointed at the back of Li Daochong's head. Li Daochong sucked in a cold breath and woke up with a start. Blizzard Ice had never shown mercy to this kind of incompetent student who dozed off in class. This guy dared to sleep and snore in his class. This was a challenge to his authority as a first-class lecturer. If he did not punish him, he would be in trouble in the future. Li Daocheng's eyes were still drowsy. However, when he raised his eyes and saw Blizzard Ice standing in front of him, he was shocked. With an apologetic expression, he hurriedly stood up and subconsciously greeted, "Hello, teacher." Ah! There was a burst of laughter in the big classroom. Lu Feng, who was sitting next to Li Daocheng, had a gloomy expression. He specially sat next to Li Daocheng today because he wanted to have a meal with him after class to comfort this kid. When he found out that Li Daocheng had tried to commit suicide last week, he felt very upset. After all, they were brothers who slept on the upper bunk. Last semester, before Li Daocheng's father's accident, he lived in the dormitory. After the accident, he was ostracized and moved out of the dormitory. That kind of atmosphere was indeed unbearable. However, Li Daocheng had always been good to Lu Feng. The latter came from a poor family. To be able to attend Xiansong University, he basically gave everything he had. Lu Feng's cultivation expenses and living expenses had to be earned by part-time jobs. However, it was still far from enough. When Li Daocheng saw that Lu Feng was short on money, he gave his cultivation resources to him, saying that it was useless for him to use them. Lu Feng had always been grateful. Li Daocheng's rudeness caused a burst of laughter. However, one does not hit a smiling person. Blizzard Ice was about to explode. She could see that this student's attitude was good. In her impression, he did not have any previous record. Blizzard Ice looked at Li Daocheng's silly face and her anger subsided a lot. However, she could not let go of such an arrogant snoring in class. She had to teach this student a lesson so that he would remember it better. Otherwise, if other students snored in class in the future, she would not be able to control them. Hence, she asked, "This student, please answer my question." Blizzard Ice crossed her arms in front of her chest. It was obvious that she wanted to embarrass Li Daocheng. What question? Li Daocheng had slept for most of the class. How would he know the question? He scratched his head and asked. Another burst of laughter. What is spiritual base programming? Blizzard Ice repeated the question with a cold face. Everyone in the classroom had a mocking look on their faces. They wanted to see Li Daocheng make a fool of himself. A few seconds of silence. Blizzard Ice did not want to waste any more time. Just as she was about to reprimand Li Daocheng, the latter suddenly opened his mouth. Spiritual base programming is the design of a controllable system that has the effect of spiritual base flow. It uses the spiritual base language that the spiritual brain can understand to communicate with the spiritual base brain so that the spiritual brain can complete the designated task step by step according to the person's instructions. Li Daocheng explained his understanding. Blizzard Ice, who was sure that Li Daocheng would not be able to answer, was surprised. Although this guy did not explain it in a very official way, the meaning he expressed was even more accurate than what was written in the textbook. In other words, it was easier to understand. After Li Daocheng finished his answer, he was nervous. He did not know if he was right or not. He had basically answered subconsciously. As an excellent programmer, how could he not know what programming was? However, Li Daocheng was not sure if the spiritual base programming here was the same as the one in his world. At this time, Blizzard Ice looked at Li Daocheng expressionlessly. She did not say anything. The latter felt his scalp tingle. "Teacher, am I right?" Li Daocheng probed. Yes, spiritual base programming is to let the spiritual brain understand the person's intentions and instructions. Blizzard Ice came back to her senses and nodded. She continued with Li Daocheng's words and waved her hand to signal Li Daocheng to sit down. He was actually right? Li Daocheng secretly heaved a sigh of relief and sat down. Lu Feng looked at Li Daocheng with a face of surprise. He did not expect this kid to actually answer correctly. Li Daocheng was frozen for a moment, and his sleepiness disappeared a lot. He was very surprised that he could answer the question correctly, and became curious about spiritual-based programming. Li Daochong was afraid that he would miss a single word of Blizzard Ice's explanation. The more he listened, the more surprised and excited he became. Although the spiritual-based programming for the spiritual brain was very different from computer programming, the principles were similar. It was just that spiritual-based programming was more mysterious. It required spiritual power to create a spiritual-based programming code to communicate with the spiritual brain, instead of typing on a keyboard. Li Daochong became very interested in spiritual-based programming. Wasn't a spiritual sequencer a programmer? Before Li Daochong could get enough of it, the bell for the end of class rang. Lu Feng pulled Li Daochong and ran to the cafeteria. "Little Chong, let's go. I'll treat you to a big meal and celebrate." "Celebrate? Celebrate what?" Li Daochong did not understand. "Haha, didn't you see Blizzard Ice's stunned expression when she looked at you? You were able to answer the question and shocked her. The number of students in Xian University who can shock Blizzard Ice can be counted on one hand. Now that one of them is you, don't you think we should celebrate?" Lu Feng said with a laugh. Lu Feng saw Li Daochong early in the morning and found him dispirited and depressed. He knew that this brother had not walked out of the shadow. He was listless the whole morning and looked like he had nothing left to live for. He looked like he would slit his wrist at any time. Lu Feng was afraid that Li Daochong had not thought it through, so he found an excuse to treat Li Daochong to a meal. He wanted to make Li Daochong feel better. Lu Feng was Li Daochong's best friend during his university days. He was also the only one in class who did not mock him. Regarding his invitation, Li Daochong naturally could not refuse. His stomach was already flat from hunger, and the stone-horned beef he ate in the morning was already gone. Passing through the field, the two exited the school and arrived at the food street outside the school. Li Daochong was yawning all the way, looking like he would fall at any time. He was not interested in anything around him. Lu Feng saw this and sighed in his heart. Lu Feng was not very well off, so he naturally could not afford to treat him to a high-end restaurant. He found a popular medium-sized restaurant. Li Daochong sat down at the table and dozed off. Lu Feng had no choice but to order the dishes himself. Soon, several side dishes were on the table. There was also a bottle of cheap spirit wine that was popular in the Federation, Huaxing Daku. Li Daochong, who was dozing off, smelled the fragrance and woke up automatically. However, when he saw the 4 side dishes, he was clearly disappointed. This bit of food was not enough to fill the gap between his teeth. Lu Feng naturally did not know what Li Daochong was thinking. He thought that Li Daochong did not have any taste. He picked up a mouthful of food and placed it in Li Daochong's bowl. "Little Chong, think about everything. It's not a big deal. Look at me, I'm still living a poor life. In order to go to Xian University, I took a loan of more than 100,000 Federation coins." Li Daochong restrained his strong appetite and finished the meal under Lu Feng's persuasion. Li Daochong naturally understood Lu Feng's good intentions. To have a friend who did not despise him when he was in dire straits and even thought about him, it could be considered a great blessing in life. After finishing the meal, Lu Feng wanted to invite Li Daochong to Drunken Beauty Hot Spring for a bath, but Li Daochong politely declined. At this time, Li Daochong's mind was filled with spirit-based programming. He had developed a strong interest in this subject, which coincided with his previous profession. After parting with Lu Feng, Li Daochong went straight to the school library. For the entire afternoon, Li Daochong threw away all distracting thoughts and immersed himself in various spirit-based programming books. Million small. In the process of reading, Li Daochong realized that his memory and reading speed had greatly increased compared to before. The psychokinesis battle technique had greatly increased his mental strength. In the evening, Li Daochong left the library and ran all the way home. His stomach was extremely hungry. The amount of food he ate in the afternoon was equivalent to not eating at all. Millions small in the afternoon. Speaking of mental strength, he had also used up a lot of energy. His stomach was already sticking to his back. On the way home, Li Daocheng's stomach kept on growling. When he saw the door, he could not wait to push it open. "Silver bottle, I'm back. Do you still have red braised stone horn beef? I'm starving," Li Daocheng shouted as soon as he entered the door. Just as he finished speaking, Li Daocheng's pupils shrank. The situation was not right. The courtyard was a bit messy, and one of the doors in the room was also broken. Usually, when Li Daocheng came back, Silver Bottle would come out to welcome him without him shouting. However, there was no movement this time. Just as Li Daocheng was about to enter the house, his back tightened, and a gust of wind blew behind him. After Li Daocheng finished learning the psychokinesis battle technique, his sensitivity had greatly increased. His reaction speed was fast. He jumped forward, turned around, raised his hand, and threw out a punch. Bang! The two fists collided in the air and exploded with a dull sound. Huh! Chapter 10. The one who attacked Li Daocheng was none other than Gang Chui, who had stopped him at the teaching building a few days ago. Li Daocheng's face flashed with coldness, but it disappeared quickly. His expression quickly returned to his usual silly look, but his mind was working quickly to analyze the situation. "What are you doing at my house?" Li Daocheng glanced at the inner room and asked. "Your house? Stupid boy, you're dreaming. Although this is a slum, such a big house would cost at least a few thousand Federation coins to buy. Can a piece of trash like you, who was kicked out of the house after being a rebel, buy it?" Gang Chui sneered. "I rented this place. Before the lease is up, this is my house. Please get out." Li Daocheng was too lazy to talk nonsense with this big guy. "Hee boy, you're really naive and cute. Look at what this is." Gang Chui took out a small red card from his arms. It was actually the Federation's official house contract spirit card. He continued, "I already bought this place. This is my house, and you want me to get out? Were you sent by a monkey to tease me? Sorry, you're the one who should get out. I rented this place for 3 months, and only 2 months have passed. The lease is not up yet. Why should I get out?" Li Daocheng was stunned. "Who told you that the lease is not up yet? The monthly rent here is 10,000 Federation coins, and you only paid 30. Now that you've lived here for 2 months, the rent is 20,000. You now owe me 19,970 Federation coins. Hand it over immediately or get out." Gang Chui arrogantly waved his hand and pointed at the door. Li Daocheng didn't expect Gang Chui to be so shameless. "What about me? I'm the landlord. It's only right and proper for me to collect rent from you. Do you want to go back on your word? Let me tell you, the Shenghua Federation is particular about the cultivation method. If you don't pay the rent, I'll go to the Tianyuan City Cultivation Court and sue you for illegal occupation," Gang Chui said righteously. Li Daocheng didn't know much about the Federation's laws. He had indeed lived here for 2 months, but the landlord didn't even tell him that he had sold the house. He didn't even sign a lease contract before this, so he was now in a passive position. He fell silent for a moment. Li Daocheng actually didn't care about Gang Chui's extortion at all. He was just stalling for time. Li Daocheng had sensed that there were 3 people in the room since the beginning of Hammer's sneak attack. One of them was Silver Bottle. Her breath was very weak, and Li Daocheng was very worried about her. Perhaps Li Daocheng hadn't reached the point where he could use his mental strength to explore the situation around him, but with the strength of his current perception, he could still sense the movements within 10 meters of him if he concentrated fully. If it weren't for the safety of Silver Bottle, Li Daocheng would definitely go up and beat Gang Chui up. He even had the intention to kill him. This big guy kept finding trouble with him, insulting and beating up Silver Bottle. He had already touched Li Daochong's bottom line. Since he was a child, Li Daochong had always lived by the principle of, if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. However, there was another sentence below this sentence: if people offend me, I will eliminate them completely. Li Daochong became a programmer after he became an adult. Before that, he was born in a very special family. His family was very poor. His parents had no choice but to take the newborn Li Daochong to the United States to work. They lived in the slums where black people gathered for a long time. In that kind of place, they had to be vigilant at all times. The slightest carelessness could cost their lives. Shootings were frequent, and street fights were staged every day. Originally, Li Daochong's parents only planned to work hard in the United States for a few years, save a sum of money, and return home. Who knew that a year before the construction period was about to end, his father was lured to the casino to gamble. The family's hard-earned savings were all lost, and they also owed a large debt. The creditor directly detained his father's work visa. Not only was there no way to return home, but the family was often harassed by burly people from the underworld. Once the visa period was up, it was equivalent to being an illegal resident. He was no different from a homeless person. He couldn't even find a job. Li Daochong, who was only 7 years old at the time, had to pick up junk with his mother during the day. At night, he went to a private night school in Chinatown. It was also during that time that he came into contact with games and programming. His mother taught Li Daochong that no matter how difficult life was, he had to have hope and dreams. Otherwise, he was worse than a salted fish, just a moving feces machine. In the car junkyard, Li Daochong had to compete with black children who were much older than him for high-quality garbage, such as copper pipes, meters, and tires. Growing up in such an environment for a long time, Li Daochong's ruthlessness was stimulated to the greatest extent. Because if you weren't ruthless enough, not only did it mean that you couldn't get good garbage, you couldn't make money, you would starve, and you might even lose your life. When Li Daochong was 13 years old, he was blocked by 3 black youths in the car junkyard. If Li Daochong wasn't ruthless enough, he would have been killed. 1 against 3, Li Daochong's arm was broken. Of the 3, 2 were seriously injured, and 1 was in a vegetative state. Li Daochong was sued because of this. Fortunately, he was a minor, and the surveillance camera on the highway outside the junkyard also captured most of the process. In the end, it was ruled that it was self-defense. After this incident, Li Daochong's family received help from China in the United States. Until the age of 15, Li Daochong and his parents returned to China. A stable life didn't come easy. After returning to China, Li Daochong devoted himself to study, and finally ended the days of starvation and crisis. During that period of time, Li Daochong's character became firm and persistent, and there was a ruthlessness that ordinary people didn't have. This was the prerequisite for him to become an excellent programmer later on. Li Daochong, I know you can't take out that much money. You are now penniless, and only the card slave girl beside you is worth some money. Since we are classmates, I won't take advantage of you. That lowly slave I will calculate according to the market price, not a cent less. 50,000 Federation dollars, you can mortgage your card slave to me. After deducting 20,000 for rent, you still have 30,000. Do you want cash, or do you want to live for another 3 months? It's up to you, how about it? Gang Chui smiled cunningly. When these words came out, Li Daochong really wanted to kill Gang Chui. He was really pushing people too far, causing trouble for him time and time again. If it was only directed at him, Li Daochong would have tolerated it. Gang Chui shouldn't have had any ideas about Yinping. In name, Yinping was his servant. She had been by his side since she was 6 years old. Li Daochong had always treated Yinping as his family. He wouldn't order her around, so how could he let others trample on her? Gang Chui said that Li Daochong didn't have money. If it had been the day before, it wouldn't have been wrong, but now it was a different story. Yesterday, Li Daochong had just agreed to Qiao Shima's fake marriage. This morning, he had already received a deposit of 100,000 Federation dollars from his spiritual internet wallet. Qiao Shima had also personally delivered 20 spirit stones to him in the morning. Now that he had received the deposit, Li Daochong would definitely fulfill his promise to Qiao Shima. If not, he would really kill Gang Chui and leave Blue Bay Star with Yinping. The Federation star field was so big, it wouldn't be easy to find a place to live in seclusion. However, Li Daochong hadn't touched the deposit. If Gang Chui pushed him too far, Li Daochong could only kill him, return the deposit to Qiao Shima, and escape with Yinping. After making up his mind, Li Daochong calmly asked, "Where is Yinping?" Gang Chui grinned and snapped his fingers. Two people walked out of the house, dragging Yinping behind them. Young master, hurry up and leave. Don't worry about me." Yinping, who was on the verge of death, said nervously when she saw Li Daochong. Looking at Yinping, who was covered in wounds, Li Daochong's eyes flashed with killing intent. He had already made up his mind. His hands, which were hanging by his sides, slowly clenched into fists. 3 cultivator students who were as strong as oxen had actually dealt such a heavy blow to a little girl who didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. They were worse than beasts. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Li Daochong was about to make his move, there was an urgent knock on the door. Gang Chui frowned. He was about to instruct Li Daochong to tell the person outside to leave when the door was pushed open. With Butcher Lu in the lead and Auntie Li behind him, 5 or 6 nearby residents swarmed in. "Xiaochong, it's Auntie Li's birthday today. The neighbors are gathering together. Why aren't you and Yinping there yet?" Butcher Lu asked as soon as he entered. "Yinping girl, what's wrong with you? Who are you? Why are you hitting people? Is there any law in this world? Call the police, call the police." Auntie Li immediately cried out in alarm when she saw Yinping's face covered in blood. One by one, uncles and aunties over the age of 50 quickly surrounded Gang Chui, their faces filled with anger. Seeing the neighbors swarming in one by one, Li Daochong was stunned. He never would have thought that these slum residents would show up at this time. His shock warmed up and his killing intent instantly dissipated. Gang Chui was a little dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He hadn't expected so many people to show up at once. It would be terrible if things got out of hand. The house contract spirit card in Gang Chui's hand was a fake and couldn't stand up to scrutiny at all. It was just a fool like Li Daochong to begin with. This bunch of old men and women weren't so easy to fool. What's the use of calling the police? She's just a card slave. If she's hit, then so be it. Li Daochong, I still have things to do today. If you don't pay the rent by tomorrow, just you wait. Gang Chui said in exasperation. He rudely pushed aside the uncles and aunties surrounding him and quickly left. The 2 guys holding Yinping saw that something was wrong and threw Yinping away. They also quickly left the scene. Li Daochong picked up Yinping, who was already extremely weak. "Little Chong, quickly bring this girl to the community hospital for treatment. How could these guys bear to be so cruel to a little girl? They're really inhumane," Auntie Li said anxiously. "Uncle Lu, Auntie Li, why did you suddenly come over? Is there really someone celebrating their birthday?" Li Daochong asked curiously. "Little Chong, don't ask so much. Quickly bring Yinping girl to the hospital." Auntie Li heard Yinping's cries for help and thought it was strange. She was afraid that something would happen to you 2 children, so she called us over to take a look. Butcher Lu patted Li Daochong's shoulder and sighed as he looked at Yinping's bruised face. "Uncle Lu, Auntie Li, thank you." Li Daochong bowed deeply. These people who lived in the lowest class of Tianyuan City, their actions were so simple and unpretentious, but they were very warm. Li Daochong's gratitude came from the bottom of his heart. If it weren't for their timely appearance, today's matter would have developed in the worst direction, and it was very likely that it wouldn't end well. What are you thanking me for, silly child? We're all neighbors, so it's natural for us to help each other. Imping girl has helped us a lot. Quickly go to the hospital. Auntie Li pushed Li Daochong. Chapter 11. Li Daochong did not take Yin Ping to the community hospital. He went directly to the best hospital in Tianyuan City, Purple Cloud People's Hospital. The director of this hospital was a Jin Dan stage alchemist with superb medical skills and high prestige. It was because of him that Purple Cloud People's Hospital became the best hospital in Tianyuan City and even in the entire Blue Bay Star. Before, it had always been the first People's Hospital in Tianyuan City that was more prestigious. Of course, the cost of treatment in Purple Cloud People's Hospital was shockingly high. However, Li Daochong had 100,000 Federation dollars as a deposit now. He was not afraid of the high price. As the saying goes, you can do whatever you want with money. Sitting in the single ward, Li Daochong looked at Yin Ping, who was soaked in the healing liquid. He felt guilty. This girl had suffered a lot with him. Li Daochong almost went berserk when the results of the examination came out. Yin Ping's injuries were very serious. 7 of her ribs were broken, her right thumb was broken, her leg was fractured, and there were also internal injuries. These guys were too inhumane. Li Daochong clenched his fists. He could let go of what happened last time, but if he let it go this time, what kind of man was he? If he could not even protect the people around him, how could he cultivate? How could he be a hot-blooded cultivator? Although Yin Ping's injuries were serious, it was a good thing that in today's highly developed cultivation technology, this kind of injury was nothing. She only needed to soak in the high-concentration healing liquid for one night to recover. Yin Ping was sleeping soundly in the bath. Li Daochong meditated for a while. He could not sit still. He could not calm down because of the anger in his heart. At midnight, Li Daochong was so hungry that he walked out of the single ward to go downstairs to buy something to eat. Yin Ping's single ward was on the 7th floor. Li Daochong did not want to take the rune array teleportation ladder. He went downstairs through the emergency exit. When he reached the 4th floor, Li Daochong heard crying in the corridor below. When he went down to the 3rd floor, he saw a nurse in a white gown crying in the corner. Li Daochong didn't want to meddle in other people's business, so he walked past the young nurse. But for some reason, Li Daochong felt a chill when he passed by the nurse. The temperature in the staircase seemed to be much lower than before. Beep. The hot-blooded upgrader in Li Daochong's sea of consciousness beeped for no reason. An interface appeared in front of Li Daochong's eyes. It read, Parasitic Binding Spirit. Abilities: Parasitic, Seduction, Absorb Essence. Weakness: Must be within a 30-meter radius of the host. Beyond this range, the host's soul power will quickly drain and they will be demoted to a skeleton dwarf. In addition to absorbing soul energy, whenever a dark ghost appeared in front of Li Daochong, it would immediately display the dark ghost's name, attributes, and abilities. It was just like a game guide. Almost at the same time Li Daochong received the information, a cold wind blew behind him, and the temperature dropped rapidly. The nurse pounced at him with a ferocious expression. Good timing. Li Daochong shouted excitedly in his heart. He turned around and punched out. His fist was imbued with spirit chi, and it landed squarely on the white-clothed parasitic-bound spirit. Dong! The fist hit the white-clothed binding spirit. Li Daochong was prepared. The punch was fierce and heavy, and the white-clothed binding spirit was sent flying. The white-clothed binding spirit's ferocious face was filled with shock. Its original host was old and weak and didn't have much life force left to support it. It could die at any time. Once the host died, the binding spirit would have nowhere to hide. The binding spirit wanted to change hosts, but this place was full of spiritual energy and danger lurked everywhere. There were many humans with powerful spiritual energy scattered everywhere, and it could be discovered if it wasn't careful. Within the permitted range, the binding spirit found this staircase to be the safest place. So when the host didn't move, it chose to wait here for a more suitable host to appear. Not long after the binding spirit hid in the staircase, a young man walked down. The spiritual energy on his body was very weak. He was a good host, but the binding spirit didn't expect that this seemingly harmless host would send it flying with one punch. The spiritual energy invaded its body, and it was very uncomfortable. The poor binding spirit didn't have any thoughts of parasitizing anymore. It flew back and sank into the wall. Li Daochong saw the binding spirit escape after being sent flying. He immediately regretted punching. He should have let the binding spirit enter his body. Li Daochong's fist was itchy, and the cooked duck had flown away. He immediately felt vexed and called out, "F***CKU coward, come back." Of course, the parasitic bound spirit wouldn't listen. Instead, it sped up and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Li Daochong sighed and chased after it. In Li Daochong's eyes, the dark ghost was a spirit medicine that could quickly increase his cultivation. How could he let it go? Opening the safety door, Li Daochong entered the third-floor corridor. This was the hospital's emergency department. At midnight, there weren't many patients who came to the hospital for treatment. Other than a few patients who were undergoing treatment in the spirit fog room, the entire third floor was empty. Li Daochong glanced around. The parasite-bound spirit was nowhere to be found. According to the characteristics of the bound spirit parasite, it couldn't have run far. It must be within 30 meters, and its host must be nearby. However, once it entered the host's body and hid, it would disappear completely. Even Aurus Core stage cultivators wouldn't be able to detect it. There were 3 patients in the spirit fog room. 2 nurses were napping at the nurse's desk. There were only 5 people in sight. There were also a few emergency rooms with lights on. There should be pharmacists and doctors on duty. If he wanted to find the binding spirit, he had to find the host. Other than this floor, it was possible to find it on other floors. But when the binding spirit escaped, Li Daochong's telekinesis locked onto its path. Although it was only in the blink of an eye, Li Daochong was sure that the binding spirit didn't move up or down. It just moved horizontally. In other words, the host could only be on the 3rd floor. However, Li Daochong couldn't tell who was the host just by looking at it. Once the binding spirit entered the host, it would become one with the host. Only a great cultivator like Yuanying could detect it with his nascent soul. With Yuanying's help, there was no way to find the binding spirit. Although the parasite-bound spirit was a low-level nether ghost, it was a headache for many cultivators as they had no way to deal with it. In the early days of the nether domain's descent, there were even tragic cases where thousands of innocent people were killed without being able to find the true host. Li Daochong narrowed his eyes. If he wanted to accurately locate the host, he could only rely on the hot-blooded upgrader. Whenever it sensed death aura at a close distance, the hot-blooded upgrader would send out a clear alarm. But after the binding spirit entered the host's body, its death energy would be completely covered by the host's life energy and disappear without a trace. Just relying on the blood spirit upgrader to sense it clearly wouldn't work. Li Daochong looked at the 5 people in front of him, his mind spinning rapidly. He and the blood spirit upgrader should be one. If he could touch the host and guide spirit energy into the host, could he make the blood spirit upgrader sense the death energy of the binding spirit in the host? Li Daochong's eyes flashed. Whether it worked or not, he had to try it. But if he just went up and touched each of them, Li Daochong believed that he would dominate the headlines of the major mainstream websites on the Spiritual Net and the Tianyuan Daily tomorrow. Rebel Li Tianyang's son is a pervert? Shocking revelation. Li Tianyang's rebel son is a pervert? A pervert has appeared in Purple Cloud First People's Hospital. You'll never guess his identity. He had to find a legitimate reason. Li Daochong scratched his head. At this moment, He saw a pharmacist doctor in the emergency room taking the pulse of a patient who had come to see a doctor. Li Daochong immediately had an idea. He could disguise himself as a doctor. The two nurses were dozing off, so no one paid attention to Li Daochong. He saw that the door of a consultation room was open, but there was no one inside, so he walked in. There was a white robe exclusively worn by pharmacists on the back of the chair. He casually picked it up and put it on. After putting on the white robe, Li Daochong quickly walked out of the consultation room, but he didn't try it one by one. The probability of the two nurses being parasitized was not high. They worked in Purple Cloud First People's Hospital every day, where pharmacists gathered. The binding spirit could do nothing but hide on them. Once it absorbed the host's soul energy, it would be exposed. This binding spirit was most likely carried by the patient who had come to see a doctor. Li Daochong directly entered the spirit fog room and took the pulse of the three patients who had been immersed in the spirit fog. The three of them tried one by one, but there was no reaction from the blood spirit upgrader. Was it not on them? Or was it useless? Li Daochong walked out of the spirit fog room with a disappointed face. Just as he was thinking about whether to find an excuse to take the pulse of the two nurses, an urgent female voice sounded from the chest of the white robe. "Dr. Zhang, quickly go to consultation room 3. The patient has been waiting for 20 minutes, and now he suddenly fell into a coma. Dr. Chen of consultation room 3 has gone to the deputy director's office for a meeting. Please go and take a look." The nurse's voice was very anxious. "Dr. Zhang?" Li Daochong looked down and saw a small exquisite card hanging on the chest of the white robe. The name Zhang Liang was engraved on it, and there was also a position below it: pharmacist. The nurse's urgent voice also came from the card. There were other patients, so he naturally couldn't miss it. Li Daochong quickly walked into consultation room 3. As soon as he reached the door, he heard a woman's sobbing voice coming from inside. "Dad, what's wrong? Wake up, don't scare me." Li Daochong walked into consultation room 3. Inside, a tall girl was standing beside the bed, desperately shaking an old middle-aged man with his eyes closed and white hair on his temples. Her pretty face was filled with panic and anxiety. Li Daochong had just walked in when the girl abruptly turned around and slapped him in the face without any explanation. Slap. The girl's wrist was firmly caught by Li Daochong. The girl was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect this doctor, who looked a little too young in front of her, to be able to catch her attack so easily. However, in just half a second, the girl recovered from her shock and glared at Li Daochong as she shouted, "What are you doing? Are all doctors of Zixiao People's Hospital so negligent in their duties? If anything happens to my dad's health, I'll definitely go to the Supreme Cultivation Court of the Federation and sue you." Li Daochong was expressionless. He didn't feel the girl's questioning and threats. He wasn't a doctor, so he could sue whoever he wanted. He only came here to find the parasitic-bound spirit, and he didn't care about anything else. However, the girl's attitude made him very unhappy. If he hadn't reacted quickly, that slap would have swollen her face. He exerted force in his hand and threw the girl to the side. Li Daochong grabbed the wrist of the unconscious middle-aged man on the bed and injected a trace of spirit energy into the middle-aged man's body. Beep. Chapter 12. The voice in his mind caused Li Daochong's eyes to light up, and his lips curled up. Found it. The host was the unconscious middle-aged man in front of him. This move worked. Li Daochong immediately poured all his spirit qi into the middle-aged man's body. He naturally couldn't sense the bound spirit parasite, but once the blood spirit upgrader came into contact with the dark ghost, it would automatically absorb its soul force. The bound spirit parasite hidden in the middle-aged man's body sensed danger and tried to escape again, but it was too late. With a roar from the depths of his soul, the middle-aged man's body twitched. Li Daocheng's spirit qi quickly flowed back like a vacuum cleaner, sucking the bound spirit parasite into Li Daocheng's body along with it. Pop pop! Blue sparks flashed in his mind, and the bound spirit parasite was annihilated by an invisible force. One bound spirit parasite killed. Soul force gained. Host leveled up to level 3. The spirit qi Li Daocheng had just consumed was instantly replenished, and it was even more abundant than before. He broke through the second level of qi refinement and reached the third level of qi refinement. The girl who had been flung aside glared at Li Daocheng. Seeing that her father had only been unconscious, but after being touched by the young doctor, he began to convulse, and she was about to explode when the unconscious middle-aged man suddenly coughed and slowly opened his eyes. "Dad, you're awake. You scared me to death. Does your chest still hurt?" Seeing that the middle-aged man had woken up, the girl's anger eased. Ignoring Li Daocheng, she rushed to the bed and grabbed the middle-aged man's hand. "Not anymore," the middle-aged man replied, but his eyes were fixed on Li Daocheng. With a look of surprise, he asked, "Doctor, what did you do to me just now? I thought I was going to die. Was the technique you used just now similar to the qi therapy of ancient medicine? I didn't expect you to know ancient medicine at such a young age. Amazing." The girl was stunned. She looked at Li Daocheng in a different light. She couldn't react and felt a little embarrassed. She had been so rude to him just now and had almost delayed things. This pharmacist doctor looked so young, but his medical skills were so superb. No wonder his father didn't want to come to the Purple Cloud People's Hospital instead of the Scarlet Sun Planet's medical facilities. This place was really full of hidden talent. The girl glanced at the name tag on Li Daocheng's white robe and said, "Dr. Zhang, I'm sorry. I was too impulsive just now. Please don't take it to heart. I apologize to you." As he spoke, he lowered his head, too embarrassed to look straight at Li Daocheng. "Forget it. It's fine as long as your father's condition is not affected." Li Daocheng didn't take it to heart in the first place. Now that he had successfully killed the bound spirit and absorbed its soul power, breaking through to the third layer of qi refining, he was in a very good mood. Naturally, he wouldn't bicker with a girl. Only then did Li Daocheng pay attention to the girl. She had delicate features, short hair, thick eyebrows, and a heroic look. She was an atypical beauty. The clothes she was wearing were the most popular styles, and the materials were also quite special. There was a talisman array flowing on it. If he guessed correctly, from the logo, it should be the luxury brand Yunyao from the spiritual Taoist clothing series. This kind of clothing not only looked good, but also had a certain protective effect. It had the effect of reducing physical and magical damage. A piece of clothing would cost at least 10,000 Federation coins. What she was wearing must have cost several tens of thousands. Li Daocheng looked at the middle-aged man's clothes. They were also wearing high-end clothes. He immediately understood that this was a very rich father and daughter. Not only that, Li Daocheng also felt that the girl's spiritual energy wasn't weak. It was even higher than his own. As for what realm she was at, Li Daocheng couldn't make an accurate judgment with his current cultivation. "Doctor, I was infected with a poisonous cold a year ago. No matter what I did, it couldn't be cured. My body was getting weaker and weaker day by day. I had chest pains and dizziness. In the last 3 months, it was getting worse and I would faint for no reason. I went to who knows how many hospitals to seek medical treatment, but no doctor could diagnose me. Last time, I was in a coma for a day and a night. Even after consuming 500 liters of clear spirit medicine, it was useless." The middle-aged man was filled with emotion. Who could understand the pain his body had to endure this year? It was simply worse than death. This was the most comfortable time of the year for him. "Doctor, I really have to thank you this time. Do you know what illness my father has?" The girl's attitude changed greatly. Li Daocheng naturally wouldn't answer this question. How could a qi condensation student detect a bound spirit parasite that even Gene Dan cultivators couldn't detect? The middle-aged man wasn't infected with a poisonous cold. He was just being parasitized by a bound spirit parasite. Over the past year, his vitality had been drained little by little and his body had naturally deteriorated. Li Daochong couldn't tell them the truth and expose his secret. He didn't want to be captured by the Federation government and sent to the Federation Cultivation Research Institute to be used as a lab rat for research. I'm just a substitute doctor. You should ask the doctor on duty for the specifics. Your father is awake now, so there's nothing for me to do. Li Daochong turned around and left after saying this. Cough cough pu. As soon as Li Daochong turned around, the middle-aged man coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of blood. Dad, the girl cried out in alarm. Li Daochong frowned and stopped in his tracks. He turned around and saw that the middle-aged man's forehead had turned black and his eyes were lifeless. His vitality was rapidly draining from his body. Li Daochong grabbed the middle-aged man's wrist and injected spirit qi. Then, a look of astonishment appeared on his face. The hot-blooded upgrader sounded again. There was actually a bound spirit parasite inside the middle-aged man's body, but this bound spirit parasite was wrapped in a layer of black gas. At this moment, the black gas was rapidly spreading and nibbling away at the middle-aged man's soul power at a visible speed. Li Daochong injected all his spirit qi into the middle-aged man's body and tangled with the black gas, trying to get the hot-blooded upgrader to absorb it. But the hot-blooded upgrader didn't react at all. The black gas could actually block the hot-blooded upgrader's senses. Li Daochong was startled. Could it be a black wraith? This was the highest level of bound spirits, the dark ghost. It evolved from a bound spirit parasite. If it continued to evolve, the black wraith would become a ghost disciple. At the ghost disciple level, it was a whole new level. If you don't have Qi refinement level 6, you'd better run for your life. Li Daochong desperately urged his spirit Qi, not daring to let even a trace of the black gas enter his body. The black gas didn't seem to be soul power, nor was it death gas. It was just a miasma formed by resentment, and this resentment came from the human heart. Li Daochong's face and ears turned red. Steam rose from his hair. He gritted his teeth and fought against the black gas. But finally, under Li Daochong's relentless efforts, the two forces were evenly matched. There was a rejection and Li Daochong was bounced away. The middle-aged man's complexion was slightly better than before, but his expression was still pained. "Doctor, save me. I feel terrible." The girl was so anxious that tears flowed out. "Doctor, my father's illness is acting up again. Please save him." Li Daochong's face was pale and his back was soaked in sweat. He had used a lot of spirit qi just now. The black gas was very strong, stronger than any dark ghost Li Daochong had encountered so far. Li Daochong looked at the middle-aged man in silence. He didn't have much spirit qi left, so he didn't dare to rashly inject what little spirit qi he had left into the middle-aged man's body. If he couldn't fight against the black gas and was counterattacked by it, he would suffer internal injuries at best. At worst, the black gas would corrode his spirit and cause him to go berserk. The risk was too great. Li Daochong wanted to give up. Although the black wraith wrapped in black gas inside the middle-aged man's body was very powerful and very tempting, in order to absorb soul power, he would risk injury and even qi refinement deviation. Li Daochong was ready to give up. The girl saw that Li Daochong wasn't moving and the middle-aged man's expression became more painful. She bit her lower lip and got up to close the door. "Dr. Zhang, tell me directly. Can you cure my father's illness?" "With my current level, it's very difficult," Li Daochong said honestly. The girl's eyes were still filled with tears, but her face was cold and there was some disdain in her eyes. "Very difficult, so it's not impossible? Tell me, how much do you want?" Hearing this, Li Daochong was stunned for a moment. Then he reacted. So it could be done like this. 100,000. Li Daochong stated the price. If the other party was really willing to pay, he just happened to have the 20 spirit stones that Xiao Shima had given him in the morning. He could waste a few spirit stones to recover his spirit chi and try again. You. The girl was so angry that she couldn't speak. This guy was too shameless, taking advantage of the situation to demand an exorbitant price. The girl's eyes were spitting fire, but there was no other way when she saw the middle-aged man curled up in the hospital bed and trembling. Her father's illness was very strange. This guy in front of her was the only doctor who could quickly relieve her father's pain. At this time, even if she found other doctors, they might not be able to do anything. Okay, 100,000 it is. You treat him first. Once he's cured, I'll transfer the money to you. The girl gritted her teeth and emphasized the words, cured. Her meaning was very clear. If he was cured, everything was negotiable. If he couldn't be cured, she wouldn't give him a single penny. No, you have to pay first. Just now, I was almost infected by the virus in your father's body. Chi therapy is very risky and will hurt myself. If you don't pay first, I can't help you. Li Daochong's attitude was firm. You? How sure are you that you can cure him? The middle-aged man curled up in the hospital bed and said painfully. 50%. Li Daochong gave the answer. Through the competition just now, Li Daochong roughly knew that his current spiritual energy was comparable to the black gas in the middle-aged man's body. Therefore, he came to this conclusion. After hearing Li Daochong's answer, the middle-aged man's painful face paused for a moment and showed a trace of surprise. Although the red sun star was not an important cultivation planet in the Federation, it was no worse than the blue bay star. In the past 3 months, he had visited almost all the hospitals and relevant doctors on the red sun star, and all of them had given him a notice of critical illness, and he could only live for 2 months. All the doctors thought that he couldn't be cured, let alone the chances of a cure. It was basically zero. However, this young man had a 50% chance of success. For the middle-aged man who only had 2 months left to live, even if there was only a 10% chance, it was definitely worth a try, let alone a 50% chance. The middle-aged man was very clear about his current situation. It was worse than death. Just now, when the young man's chi entered his body, he obviously felt much better. Whether he could be cured or not, he could only try his best in his current situation. Enduring the pain, he said to the girl, "Sino, give it to him." The girl named Sino raised her wristwatch reluctantly. "Come and identify the spiritual pattern code. I'll transfer the money to you." Li Daochong raised his wristwatch and scanned it. Then, the girl entered the number. With a beep, the transfer was completed. Li Daochong immediately took out 5 spirit stones and put them into the solution. This solution could be seen everywhere in the hospital. It was used to dissolve different kinds of medicine and spirit stones. The 5 spirit stones quickly turned from light blue to white, and the transparent solution turned light blue. Li Daochong drank the solution in one gulp. This method only used 20% of the spiritual energy, which was a pure waste. No one would use spirit stones to recover their spiritual energy. Li Daochong had no other choice but to use this simple and crude method. Chapter 13. Shino was extremely unhappy that she had given away 100,000 Federation coins, just like that. Now that she saw Li Daochong recovering his spiritual energy in such a crude and illiterate way, she immediately became suspicious of his identity. A dignified pharmacist from an A-class 4th-class cultivation hospital didn't even have any chi recovery liquid? How could he recover his spiritual energy in such a barbaric way? The more Shino thought about it, the more suspicious she felt. Maybe this young man had been fooling her from the beginning to the end for the purpose of swindling her money. None of the pharmacists on Red Sun Planet could diagnose her father's illness, so she had no choice but to find other ways to treat him. She had just arrived at Blue Bay Star tonight and planned to rest for the night and come to Purple Cloud People's Hospital tomorrow, but her father fell ill at night and she had no choice but to rush over and register for the emergency room. She waited in the emergency room for a long time, but no doctor came. She urged the nurse to arrange for another doctor to come. This guy made her father feel much better as soon as he came, but his condition worsened immediately after a while. Could it be that this guy had used some kind of trick? This guy looked about the same age as her. Healing was the profession that took the longest time to study and was the most difficult to get certified. Shino had never seen such a young pharmacist in all her years. Even if he was just a pharmacist, it was impossible for him to be so young. He had to be at least 27 or 28 years old. While Shino's imagination was running wild, the middle-aged man who was being treated also became suspicious. He had been eager to seek medical help before, but after the young pharmacist had privately offered a high price, the middle-aged man gradually calmed down. At this time, the young man was already circulating his spiritual energy to treat him, but his pain didn't lessen much. In fact, it even worsened and he couldn't stop coughing. Had he run into a swindler? When this thought flashed through the middle-aged man's mind, the flame of hope in his heart was instantly extinguished. The pain that came from the depths of his soul made him wish he was dead. The middle-aged man's twisted features revealed a bitter smile, as if he had seen through the mundane world. He sighed inwardly, thinking that he had been too naive. He had spent a lot of money to invite a Jean Dan pharmacist from Red Sun Planet, but even he couldn't do anything about his strange illness. How could a mere pharmacist cure him? However, even if he was seriously ill, he wasn't so easily fooled. This young man had found the wrong person. Let's see how he's going to put on and act now. It's not so easy to take my money. Even though the middle-aged man was in unbearable pain, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Time ticked by. Li Daocheng's entire body was drenched in sweat. His face was dripping with sweat, and his hair was foggy. Seeing Li Daocheng's condition, the girl's expression became strange. She couldn't see through him at all. If this was an act, then it was too real. Just as the middle-aged man was about to lose his patience and speak up to stop Li Daocheng, his body suddenly stiffened and he was unable to move. Following that, a warm current surged in his abdomen. At the same time, Li Daocheng's furrowed brows slowly relaxed. The black gas was finally suppressed by him. He took a deep breath and suddenly withdrew his psyche power. In an instant, the pain in the middle-aged man's body disappeared. His chest churned and he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Li Daocheng's face was pale and he was panting heavily. However, he had managed to absorb the black resentment binding soul energy that had been lurking in the middle-aged man's body. Li Daocheng heaved a sigh of relief. The battle with the black gas was extremely dangerous. The slightest carelessness could have caused a backlash and caused him to go berserk. Fortunately, the hot-blooded upgrader had captured the dark ghost energy at the critical moment and absorbed it. The converted spiritual energy allowed Li Daocheng's soul to return to his body. Otherwise, he would have fainted on the spot. Li Daocheng turned to the girl and said, "All right, the root of the illness has been removed. However, your father's body is still very weak. Go back and eat more things to replenish his blood and qi. It's best if he soaks in a good spirit liquid every day. He'll recover after a while." "Father, how do you feel?" the girl asked anxiously as she went forward to support the middle-aged man. "I feel much better. It's like I've just woken up after sleeping for a long time. Is there anything to eat? I'm starving." The middle-aged man felt indescribably refreshed. His previous listless state had completely disappeared, and he felt as if he had been reborn. He rubbed his stomach and asked, "Let's go out and have a big meal." The girl smiled happily. "Where's Dr. Zhang?" The middle-aged man was about to thank the young man, but when he looked up, he found that the young man had disappeared. The girl turned her head and found that the young doctor who had been standing aside just now had already left. Only then did she realize that she had not thanked the young man properly. She immediately ran out of the consulting room, but Li Daochong was nowhere to be seen. The girl looked around the corridor but could not find him. She went to the nurse's desk and asked. The nurse said that Dr. Zhang was in the 5th consulting room. However, when she went to the 5th consulting room, there was only a middle-aged man with a pockmarked face sitting in the consulting room, taking the pulse of a patient who had been admitted to the emergency department. The middle-aged man who had recovered walked out of the 3rd consulting room. Seeing his daughter's confused face, he knew that he had not found the patient. Sino, this young man knows ancient medicine. I'm afraid his identity is not simple. I heard that Senior Wang Qinggu, the president of the Zixiao People's Hospital, is proficient in ancient medicine. Maybe this young man is his personal disciple. It's too late today, so there's no need to hurry. I should be able to find him tomorrow after contacting Senior Wang Qinggu. At this time, Li Daochong had returned to the single ward on the 7th floor where Yin Ping was and was meditating. He had consumed too much energy just now. However, the spiritual energy in his body had increased again. Although he had not broken through to the 3rd level of qi refining, he had reached the peak of the 3rd level of qi refining. He only needed to absorb some more soul power to break through to the 4th level of qi refining. After he finished meditating, Li Daochong fell asleep. Early the next morning, Yin Ping, who had soaked in the strengthened healing liquid overnight, had almost recovered from her injuries. Li Daochong went through the discharge procedures, paid the treatment fee of more than 5,000 yuan, and took Yin Ping home. In order to prevent Gang Chui from coming to trouble him again, Li Daochong did not let Yin Ping stay at home. He let her stay at Aunt Li's house temporarily and took the remaining stonehorn beef, beef bones, and beef tendons to the market to sell. After settling Yin Ping down, Li Daochong went to school. At first, Li Daochong thought about not going to school or even quitting school. With the help of the hot-blooded level-up device, as long as he diligently cultivated and went to the underground city to find a way to buy dark ghosts, he could absorb a large amount of low-level short ghosts. It would not be long before he could break through the qi refining stage and enter the qi gathering stage. The qi gathering stage was the key to success in the foundation establishment stage. At this stage, it was equivalent to stepping into the ranks of cultivators. The standard for graduating from Profound Firmament University was the early stage of qi gathering, and the standard for undergraduate was the middle stage of qi gathering. If he wanted to go further, he had to enter the Profound Firmament University's cultivation course to study for a cultivator's degree. However, he had to reach the late stage of qi gathering. After he completed the foundation establishment stage, he could graduate. After he graduated, he could obtain the title of cultivator and become a true cultivator. With the title of cultivator, all the major cultivation companies would fight over it. Finding a decent job would be a matter of minutes. But now, Li Daochong had completely dispelled the idea of not going to school. The hot-blooded level-up device could only conditionally increase the spiritual energy in his body. Simply increasing spiritual energy was far from enough. When it came to breaking through, there was only quantity and not quality. There was simply no way to break through. At that time, whether or not the hot-blooded level-up device would be useful was another matter. Li Daochong did not want to become a headless fly flying around. That would only result in twice the effort and not worth the loss. If he did not want the high-quality resources of Profound Firmament University, then he would be too stupid. There was a shortcut, but he did not take it. Just because he was bullied and ostracized at school, he could not stand it. If he did not have this bit of tolerance, then how could he talk about becoming the strongest cultivator? In addition, Li Daochong had a great interest in spiritual base programming. It was a professional, so learning it was easy. There were all kinds of books in the Profound Firmament University's library, and there were also senior lecturers to explain it. If he gave up, then it would be a pity. Of course, now there was another reason why Li Daochong would not drop out of school. Zhao Peng and Gang Chui, these two fellows, were too much. One wanted his life, and the other injured Silver Bottle twice. Li Daochong did not know why these two fellows were so against him, but he was sure that even if he dropped out of school, these two fellows would not let him go. They would even become more aggressive, thinking that he was afraid of them. Now that Li Daochong was at the peak of the third layer of qi refining, he was no longer the little idiot that could be bullied by anyone who saw him. Strength determines one's attitude. Now Li Daochong's strength was definitely at the top of the ordinary class. He would properly settle the score with Gang Chui and Zhao Peng during the end-of-term exam. Li Daochong spent the whole day in the library, wandering in the sea of books, absorbing nutrients as if he was thirsty. When Li Daochong came out of the library, he felt that time had passed too quickly. However, the telekinesis battle technique had greatly increased his reading speed, and the whole day's harvest was quite fruitful. Li Daochong walked out of the school gate. After walking for a while, he began to speed up. Cultivation was always in progress. After running for more than 10 minutes, Li Daochong left the main city and entered the isolation zone. This place was isolated from the western district. There were originally many buildings here, but they were all demolished later. The lights in the isolation zone were dim, and there were not many people on the street. Most of the surrounding houses had been demolished. Occasionally, a few dilapidated buildings would become a gathering place for homeless people at night. This place was also a racing paradise for the members of Tianyuan City's Flying Shuttle Association. Li Daochong's running speed had greatly increased, and so had his endurance. However, all of this was due to the large increase in the spiritual energy in his body. His physical fitness still needed to be improved. Li Daochong was just thinking about strengthening his physical fitness training from tomorrow, when he was directly faced with a dozen dazzling lights. Swoosh! Swoosh! Wung, 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 wung. After the array gate of the motorcycle was stomped on, the spirit sprayer pipe let out a heavy and muffled roar. Li Daochong stopped and frowned slightly. His face was calm as he glanced at the drivers on the shuttle one by one. These hooligans had weak spiritual energy flowing through their bodies. They were either youths who couldn't continue their studies in junior high or high school, or were abandoned by society due to problems with their spiritual veins. However, compared to most commoners, they had a bit of ability. In any case, they were at least in the first or second layer of the aura refining realm. However, Li Daochong felt a little strange. He had nothing to do with these guys, so why did they suddenly appear and stop him? Chapter 14. The person who asked the question was the boss of Tianyuan City's shuttle gang, Lu Feng. His nickname was Madman, and his brothers all called him Brother Madman or Boss Madman. He had once led his 3 ace fighters, Torch Dragon, Sky Phoenix, and Blue Phoenix, to destroy the underground forces of Liobua City, the second largest city on Indigo Bay Planet. In the end, they took 70% of Liobua City's motorcycle and shuttle business. Since then, Tianyuan City's shuttle gang had become one of the 3 major underground organizations. Lu Feng's name was well known among the common people. Lu Feng's 4th level qi refining strength was definitely a bug-like existence among ordinary people. "Why are you looking for me?" Li Daochong asked without changing his expression. "That's it." Li Daochong didn't speak, just stood there and looked at Lu Feng indifferently. The latter raised the corner of his mouth and didn't continue to speak. He took out a cigarette from his jacket pocket and lit it. "Boss, I thought it was a fierce character, but it turned out to be a skinny gigolo. Brothers don't need to do anything, I can handle it alone." A big man next to Lu Feng licked his lips and looked at Li Daochong as if looking at an appetizer. This big man was Zhu Long, one of Lu Feng's 3 ace fighters. He was 10 meters tall and weighed more than 300 pounds. His tower-like muscles were full of explosive power. Zhu Long was born with great strength, but his spiritual vein development was very low. Now he was only at the 2nd level of qi refining, but his fist strength reached an astonishing 720 pounds, and this was under the condition that he didn't use spirit qi. A top student in the ordinary class of Xian University, who was at the 3rd level of qi refining, with spirit qi, had a fist strength of about 500 pounds. Even at least 1/3 of the people in the elite class couldn't reach such a fist strength. Gang Chue's body was big enough, but compared to Zhu Long, he was a small thing in front of the Grand Wizard. Zhu Long got off the car and walked to Li Daochong. He was a head taller than him, clenched his fist, and said with a grim smile, "Young man, your bones can't stand being ravaged by this old man. If you don't want to suffer, obediently hand over the money you owe. Otherwise, I don't mind twisting your arm and stabbing it into you." Ha! The street racers roared with laughter. Li Daochong faced Zhu Long, who was less than 2 meters away from him. His heart was as calm as still water, and there was no change in his expression as he stood still on the spot. In the eyes of the other street racer gangsters, Li Daochong should be too scared to move. "Oh, money? Friend, I don't even know who you are. How could I owe you money?" Li Daochong didn't know what was going on. Although he didn't feel any fear in his heart, there was something fishy about this. He had to get to the bottom of it. "Brat, you're still pretending at a time like this." Zhu Long glared and clapped his hands. A large motorcyclist at the back opened a large wooden box and pulled out a human figure. The driver threw the person in the wooden box at Li Daochong's feet. Steel hammer? Although the person at his feet was beaten black and blue, and was tied up with hemp rope, Li Daochong still recognized that it was Gang Chue. "Your brother, don't tell me you don't know him? He borrowed 50,000 Federation coins from us, and it was due half a month ago. It's only right to repay a debt." Zhu Long spoke with conviction. "He borrowed money from you, what does it have to do with me?" Li Daochong asked doubtfully. It's him. He owes me money, but he doesn't pay it back. You can ask him for it. If he doesn't have cash, he has a card slave who can be sold for a lot of money." Gang Chue, who was lying on the ground, suddenly shouted. His big flat face was full of horror, and he was scared to death of Lu Feng and his gang. Li Daochong looked at Gang Chue, who suddenly shouted on the ground, with a face full of confusion. Today, when he was in the library, Yin Ping sent him a message. Yesterday was just a farce. The landlord didn't sell the house they rented at all, and the house contract card in Gang Chue's hand was fake. After a long time, it turned out that this brat owed a debt and couldn't pay it back when it was due, so he turned his attention to him and used despicable means to kidnap Yin Ping so that he could repay the debt? I don't owe him money. You've got the wrong person. Li Daochong said coldly, bypassing Zhu Long and leaving. Whoosh! Li Daochong had just taken 2 steps when he heard the sound of a punch. He tilted his body slightly and dodged it easily. Zhu Long's sneak attack missed, and his face was full of surprise. He didn't expect this skinny pretty boy to be so slippery. "Brother Long, take it easy. Don't kill him. The hunting police of the Federation Security Bureau are not to be trifled with. I was just worried that they wouldn't be able to find our weakness." A young man with a dirty braid saw Zhu Long's heavy attack and reminded him. Lu Feng exhaled a mouthful of smoke and squinted his eyes, revealing a look of surprise. This young man was too calm from the moment he was surrounded until now. Just now, he dodged Zhu Long's punch with ease. Li Daochong dodged the punch and didn't fight back. Instead, he quickened his pace and left. "Want to leave? In your dreams, die." Zhu Long, who was ignored, flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pulled out an iron rod hanging on his waist. This was a very low-level magic tool called brick rod. It had a certain electric shock effect, but its power was very low. Even ordinary people couldn't be paralyzed. Almost all the gangsters of the street racer gang had one. Zhu Long chased after Li Daochong and used all his strength to hit him in the back. Just when all the gangsters had a sinister smile on their faces, imagining the scene of Li Daochong being beaten down to his knees by the rod. Suddenly, Li Daochong turned around and kicked Zhu Long's lower abdomen. Zhu Long, who was halfway through waving the brick rod in his hand, watched Li Daochong turn around and kick him. He clearly saw all the movements, but he couldn't do anything about it. In the eyes of the hooligans, Li Daochong's resistance was nothing more than accelerating his death. If he angered Zhu Long, his end would be very miserable. Several hooligans couldn't bear to look directly at him. The last time someone resisted, Zhu Long broke 31 of his bones and caused his internal organs to bleed profusely. If it wasn't for the boss stopping him, that guy would have died. Lu Feng's pupils shrank fiercely. He felt that something was wrong. This young man's movements were not gorgeous and even a little ugly, but his speed was very accurate and the angle was tricky. The most terrible thing was his expression, which didn't change much from beginning to end. Even if he was surrounded by more than a dozen tall gangsters, his white face had always been calm and composed. He didn't worry about his situation at all. Bang! With a muffled sound, Li Daochong's kick hit Zhu Long's lower abdomen. Zhu Long, who didn't put Li Daochong in his eyes at all, tightened his abdominal muscles, thinking that this kick would have no effect on him. However, when Zhu Long really felt the power of this kick, he regretted it. Ouch! Zhu Long pouted his mouth in an O shape and the brick fell out of his hand. He covered his lower abdomen with both hands and his huge body flew 4 or 5 meters away. With a thud, he fell to the ground and maintained the posture of covering his abdomen with his legs on the ground. His lower abdomen seemed to be about to explode and his stomach was overturned. Ouch! Zhu Long even vomited out what he ate yesterday. The night suddenly quieted down. The wind blew past. It was early winter, and it seemed to have fallen into the dead of winter. The gangsters opened their mouths wide and looked at Li Daochong in disbelief. They really couldn't react when this gigolo kicked Zhu Long Gang Chui, who was tied up on the ground. 2 streams of hot liquid flowed out of his nose. His big flat face was stiff and twitching. Gang Chui knew how strong Zhu Long was. He had seen with his own eyes how Zhu Long fought with more than a dozen people and beat them to a pulp. How could this fool kick Zhu Long to the ground? Gang Chui was completely confused. Li Daochong looked around and said, "I'm leaving. If anyone has any objections, feel free to come." After saying that, Li Daochong turned around and left. With a buzzing sound, a motorcycle shuttle suddenly started and directly crashed into Li Daochong. The gangsters who were shocked by Li Daochong came back to their senses. Someone exclaimed, "Blue Phoenix is angry. Even if that kid doesn't die, he will be crippled." The speed of the flying shuttle was extremely fast. Li Daochong, who was only at the qi refining stage, could face it head-on. However, Li Daochong had never used his psychokinesis battle technique before. A green light flashed in his eyes, and an invisible spiritual force flew out. Blue Phoenix fiercely stepped on the talisman array spirit gate, and the flying shuttle directly hit Li Daochong. The latter turned around and stood motionless. Just when everyone thought that Li Daochong was scared silly and couldn't dodge at all. Boom! Without any warning, Blue Phoenix tilted from the flying shuttle and fell to the ground. Without control, the flying shuttle lost its stability and direction. It brushed past Li Daochong and knocked over the flying shuttle behind it. Lu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air, and the cigarette in his mouth fell out. He looked at Li Daochong with eyes full of fear. Psychokinesis attack? There was an extremely small number of cultivators who weren't very strong but had extremely powerful spiritual force. With a thought, they could turn their opponent into an idiot or paralyze them for a short period of time. These cultivators were extremely terrifying. Lu Feng had heard of them before. These cultivators were usually called psychokinesis cultivators. It was said that psychokinesis cultivators had an incomparable advantage when dealing with dark ghosts. They were the Federation's most scarce talent. Blue Phoenix got up from the ground with a puzzled expression. Just now, she had felt her vision darken and lost consciousness for a short period of time. After falling, she woke up. Without waiting for Blue Phoenix to recover from her dazed state, Li Daochong rushed forward and kicked Blue Phoenix, who had just gotten up, to the ground again. Two of Lu Feng's 3 ace fighters had been dealt with without any effort. The hooligans suddenly stopped moving and stood there in a daze. Clap, clap, clap. The sudden applause broke the silence. The one clapping was Lu Feng. As he clapped, he walked towards Li Daochong. A rare fawning smile hung on his fierce face. I admire you, I admire you. Haha, brother, you have great skills. It can be said that we didn't know each other until we fought. Who's your brother? Don't try to worm your way into being friends with me. Scram. Li Daochong's tone was cold. He had a belly full of anger. Putting aside the fact that he had been surrounded by people who wanted to press him for a debt, he had attacked when he wanted to. He had even tried to hit him with a motorcycle. If he had really hit him, he would have been finished. The more Li Daochong thought about it, the angrier he became. Lu Feng was stunned. He didn't expect Li Daochong to not give him any face. He had already shown weakness and given Li Daochong a way out. After a few exchanges, this matter was over. After seeing Li Daochong's super strength, Lu Feng naturally didn't believe that he would owe Gang Chui that guy money. After being told to scram in front of so many brothers, even if Lu Feng didn't want to become enemies with Li Daochong, he had no choice but to act. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be the boss in the future. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.